Chapter 1081, March of the Rebels. Chapter 1081, March of the Rebels. Ding Ping battled against Zhang Yimou. In terms of cultivation, Ding Ping was 6 minor levels below Zhang Yimou. However, after unleashing all of his abilities, his battle prowess was surprisingly no weaker than that of Zhang Yimou. In fact, due to his outstanding stamina and the limitless power of the nation, he could easily outlast Zhang Yimou if they were to fight a drawn-out battle. The two of them continued to battle, and the Ding clan's residence was transformed into a pile of rubble in no time at all. At least a third of the clan members had already been killed by the shock waves of the battle. Zhang Yimou became more and more astonished as the battle progressed. He had initially thought that he would be able to easily capture Ding Ping. However, his opponent's battle prowess had far exceeded his expectations. If the battle continued in this direction, perhaps he would lose. This fact drove him crazy. So be it if he couldn't defeat Ling Han. That person was a freak, after all. In fact, even his master's master, and the prodigies from the immortal realm couldn't defeat him. However, even Ling Han's disciple turned out to be so ferocious and powerful. How could he endure such humiliation? Who would have thought? Not only is Ling Han freakish, but even his disciple is not someone to be underestimated. A beautiful woman descended from the sky. There was a pair of wings on her back, and as they flapped lightly, they allowed her to soar in the sky. These wings had been useless in the small world, as all those at or above the flower blossom tier possessed the ability to fly. However, everything was different in the immortal realm. Only those who reached the heavenly body tier could glimpse the secrets of heaven and earth, and thus gain the ability to roam the skies. However, how many cultivators at the heavenly body tier did the entire joint peace planet have? Thus, having wings in the immortal realm would allow one to realize the dream of flying at least several million years before others. This woman was Dong Linger, an excellent disciple of the Cloud Phoenix Sect. Due to the spiritual qi environment of the immortal realm, and due to the fact that they had arrived after opening the sky, the group of prodigies that Dong Linger was a part of had been blessed with fortune by heaven and earth. Of course, their blessings were similar to what other ordinary people had received, and couldn't be compared to Ling Han's. Even so, all of them had already reached the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier. Humph! Enough with the sarcastic remarks. Help me suppress this brat. Zhang Yimou was extremely displeased. Dong Linger smiled and said, "Wasn't someone brimming with confidence just then and saying that they wouldn't need any help?" Her battle prowess was no weaker than that of Zhang Yimou, and she could even fly on top of that. Thus, she naturally wasn't afraid of Ding Ping fleeing from their grasp. Zhang Yimou humphed and said, "Rubbish. Why don't you try to battle him yourself?" This brat was almost as freakish as Ling Han had been. He possessed a body of incredible power that Zhang Yimou barely dared to face head-on. Letting him flee will only lead to more trouble. We need to dispose of this brat as soon as possible. There are still several Shattering Void tier cultivators in the Imperial capital, after all. Dong Linger didn't throw any more barbs, and immediately jumped into the battle. There's no need to be afraid of the Shattering Void tier cultivators. It's that old dragon that we need to remain wary of, Zhang Yimou said. Many of our seniors have already broken through to the immortal level. Once they join forces, that old dragon is nothing to worry about. Dong Linger was extremely ruthless, with each of her attacks aiming to cripple Ding Ping. In any case, they only needed a temporary puppet to ascend the throne. Thus, it would naturally be of no importance whether this puppet could cultivate or not. There was turmoil in Ding Ping's mind as he listened to their exchange. He knew that his opponents were purposefully saying this for him to hear. Their aim was to crush his fighting spirit. However, they would never have imagined that Ling Han had suddenly returned, and even created 4 Mountain River tier cultivators in a mere 3 months. Right now, there were close to 10 beings who had immortal level power in the Imperial capital. Moreover, the battle prowess of Ling Han and the Azura Demon Emperor was more so at the consummate level of the Mountain River tier. Taking into account the massive gulf in power after reaching the immortal realm, Ling Han could easily suppress these people with a single finger. Hold on, Ding Ping said in his mind. If he fled, Would his opponents become wary and delay their attack? His master didn't have the spare time to muck around with these small fries. Their aim was to journey through the entire immortal realm. It's decided, then. Ding Ping suddenly retreated, only defending and not attacking. I'm willing to cooperate with you guys. However, you must guarantee that you won't hurt me or cripple my cultivation. Dong Linger and Zhang Yimou exchanged a glance. They could see the strange look in each other's eyes. Why is this brat suddenly surrendering? Is it because he knows that he has no chance of winning against the two of us? Hee, humans are afraid of death. After all, this brat is only in his teens, so such kind of fear will only be stronger. As a youth, he still has many lofty ambitions, so he naturally won't want to die. Fine. Dong Linger and Zhang Yimou both nodded in agreement. Ding Ping was only at the Shattering Void tier, and as long as they brought him back, there would be many elites at the immortal level to keep him in check. This place wasn't the small world, where elites at the immortal level would be suppressed. Here, they could unleash their full strength. In front of elites at the immortal level, those at the Shattering Void tier were nothing but trash. Ding Ping barely uttered any words before he left with Dong Linger and Zhang Yimou. They didn't use force to restrain him, either. Both parties displayed a certain amount of sincerity. They traversed mountains and crossed rivers, eventually entering a lively and bustling city. This was where the 5 sects had headquartered. Sure enough, truly powerful forces secluded themselves in cities. All this while, the Rain Emperor and the others had been searching for the survivors of the 5 sects in secluded mountains and seas. Who would have thought that they would be blatantly living in such a bustling city? He followed Dong Linger and Zhang Mo's lead and entered a large manor. There was even a naturally formed lake in this manor, and the warm sunlight rippled across the surface of the water, making the already splendid environment appear even more tranquil. He who understands the times is a wise man. The Sword King appeared, yet he had already reached the Mountain River tier at this moment. He didn't suppress his aura, and the sword intent exuded from his body was almost tangible, forming rings of sword shadows around his body. A casual flick from these sword shadows could easily kill a cultivator at the Shattering Void tier. He had already been informed about the events just then by Dong Linger and Zhang Yimou. His suspicion hadn't been right, said it had only been a short 2 years, after all. Ling Han definitely hadn't returned yet, and the strength of the imperial capital definitely wouldn't have seen any significant improvements either. On the contrary, how many people had the 5 sects sealed away using the time liquid in these past 10,000 years? After ascending to the immortal realm, at least 1/10 of them had broken through. Right now, they had almost 40 elites at the immortal level. This was an overwhelming force, and the only person that they were still wary of was Hellion Tianyun. That old dragon was extremely freakish, and after reaching the Mountain River tier, his battle prowess was definitely terrifying. Tell us everything you know, the Sword King said. He had to learn all he could about Hellion Tianyun. Only then would he be able to form a flawless plan. Ding Ping didn't hesitate and spilled everything he knew about Hellion Tianyun from 3 months ago. The information was so detailed that even the Sword King was astonished. Brat, aren't you a little too cowardly? We're not even torturing you, yet you're already spilling your guts. The 5 sects also had some information on Hellion Tianyun, and after comparing it against what Ding Ping had told them, they discovered that Ding Ping had told them the absolute truth. They believed Ding Ping's intel. They concluded that Ding Ping was still too young, and was thus more worried about his own life and well-being. Since Ding Ping cooperated so readily, they didn't give him any more troubles. Perhaps they could use him as their dog in the future. After all, he was at the Shattering Void tier. They decided to launch their main assault on the imperial capital in 10 days. In the past few months, they had already contacted and joined forces with numerous other forces. All they were waiting for was to launch the final attack. Time flew by, and 10 days passed in a flash. Ding Ping obediently led the 5 sects, entering the city gates and marching through the imperial gates. They sneaked into the imperial palace, with several other forces gradually joining their rebel army. Ruling an empire required more than just tens or hundreds of people, after all. The rebel army quickly ballooned to several thousand strong, their might increasing by the minute. Chapter 1082, Obliterated with a Single Punch. Chapter 1082, Obliterated with a Single Punch. The rebel army charged into the imperial palace, and the guards continually retreated, not even daring to oppose them. This caused the rebels to become especially smug. They were far too powerful, so powerful that even the imperial guards fled upon catching wind of their arrival. Although the elites from the 5 sects didn't believe that the imperial palace was genuinely this weak, they didn't give it a second thought. After all, they had sent their most powerful forces this time, with their army consisting of 37 elites at the immortal level. What could Hellion Tianyan do about them? If they sent 30 elites after him, they would be able to defeat him no matter what, right? In the meantime, the remaining 7 elites would be able to sweep through the imperial palace. Were it not for the fact that they needed more than just a few people to rule the empire, the 5 sects definitely wouldn't have allied themselves with so many other forces. These forces didn't even have cultivators at the Shattering Void tier. One side was advancing with irresistible might, and one side was collapsing into a disastrous heap. Ding Ping naturally knew that this was Ling Han cooperating with them. His aim was to destroy all of the rebels in one fell swoop. This time, they definitely had to exterminate all future threats. It wasn't long before the rebel army advanced into the depths of the imperial palace, arriving before the Hall of Righteous Harmony. This was the heart of the imperial palace, the hall where officials discussed affairs, and above which the totem of the empire was placed. This hall signified the power and rule of the Great Ling Empire. If it collapsed, the power of the nation would suffer a critical blow. Thus, even if Ling Han was trying to lure them into a trap, he couldn't retreat any more once they reached this hall. Feng Puyun, the Rain Emperor, Murong Qing, and Hellion Tianyan all appeared before the hall. Meanwhile, the guards of the imperial palace stood behind the 4 of them, drawing their sabers and wearing expressions of firm determination. "Hee hee, bunch of pushovers," an elder from the 5 sects said with a chuckle. His name was Situ Jian, and he had been sealed away for several thousand years. He hadn't been awoken even when Ma Duobao had charged into the 5 sections. This was because quite a number of them hadn't been buried in the 5 sections. He had only been awakened after arriving in the immortal realm, and thus he naturally didn't know how powerful Ling Han was. He simply felt that the younger generations were too weak, not even being able to defeat this small country bumpkin. "Dog, tell me your name," Hellion Tianyan roared. His tongue was the most toxic out of everyone present. "Heh, so what if you're a descendant of the true dragons? Your battle prowess can surpass 4 stars at most. Don't tell me that you're a 5-star genius of the legends?" Situ Jian waved his hand and continued, "Follow the plan and suppress this sinful dragon first. He's got the bloodline of a true dragon. That's incredibly nutritious." 29 people immediately stepped forward to stand together with Situ Jian. They had naturally devised a plan already. These were the people tasked with dealing with Hellion Tianyan. Tisk, TSK, TSK. 30 powerful cultivators at the low extreme of the mountain river tier. Hellion Tianyan chuckled coldly and said, "However, you guys have mistaken something. Because I'm not the only elite at the immortal level." Feng Piyun, the Rain Emperor, Murong Qing, and the Rock Spirit all stepped forward, no longer suppressing their own auras. Might that was unique to immortals instantly enveloped the entire area. What? The 5 sects, along with their lapdogs, all cried out in astonishment. When had the Great Ling Empire suddenly gained 4 more elites at the immortal level? This completely ruined their plans. "Humph, you people, how has the Great Ling Empire mistreated you?" the Rain Emperor questioned. "If it weren't for Fourth Brother opening the sky, you people would have only been able to await death in the small world, suffering the fate of being refined into a pill. However, you people are actually siding with the 5 sects now? Does your conscience not hurt?" Looks of embarrassment appeared on the faces of many people. However, many more people replied with cold chuckles. As the saying went, he who understood the times was a wise man. Ling Han had been taken away as a hostage, leaving the Great Ling Empire with only one immortal level elite. Okay, fine. There were 5 now. However, this was still nothing compared to the 5 sections. So, should they choose to die alongside the Great Ling Empire? Or should they choose to prosper alongside the 5 sects? This was the immortal realm, after all, so they didn't need to worry about being refined into a realm pill any longer. As such, they had no fundamental conflict with the 5 sects, meaning that there was naturally room for mutually beneficial cooperation. This is slightly beyond my expectations. However, you people have only just advanced into the immortal level. Sending out 5 more immortal level elites will suffice. Situ Jian was taken by surprise, yet he quickly regained his composure. He wasn't the strongest elite in the 5 sects, but he was the oldest. Thus, he became one of the leaders of this rebellion. Is this all of you? The Rain Emperor swept his gaze over the rebels. He had noticed the turmoil hiding beneath the surface of peace in the imperial capital since long ago. Meanwhile, the rebellious forces that had appeared were largely within his expectations. In fact, there were a few who had hidden themselves extremely well and not left any clues at all. However, was this all of them? We're more than enough to deal with you weaklings. Situ Jian chuckled coldly and said, however, before this, I still need to kill one disobedient person. He looked toward Ding Ping. The Great Ling Empire actually had 4 other immortal level elites, yet Ding Ping hadn't told them anything about this. It was clear that he had purposefully withheld this information. Kill him, Situ Jian ordered coldly. He's just the sacrifice we need for our flag. He was a hawk, and believed that they should directly change the flag of the empire after annihilating the Rain Emperor and the others. There was absolutely no need for them to use a puppet emperor as a buffer. However, he was only one of many leaders, so he couldn't act as he pleased. Now that Ding Ping had tricked them, he saw an opportunity to advance his case. Pong! Ding Ping was tossed out. Although his battle prowess was impressive, he was still helpless against strength at the immortal level. Kneel, Situ Jian said coldly. He was going to behead Ding Ping before everyone else. Pay! Ding Ping spat, not afraid of Situ Jian in the least. I'm telling you to kneel. Situ Jian raised his voice, his eyes sinister and radiating with might that was unique to immortals. He was going to break Ding Ping's mind and force him to submit. Heh, are you threatening my disciple? Ling Han's voice traveled into their ears. Yeah? The Sword King, Azure Phoenix Divine Empress, and others were all astonished. They had suffered greatly at Ling Han's hands, so they were naturally familiar with his voice. Their minds instantly became numb with fear. Meanwhile, Situ Jian looked toward the source of the voice and roared, Who is it? Ling Han walked out, a faint smile on his face. Who are you? Situ Jian asked. Ling Han, the Sword King and others of the older generation, as well as Zhang Yimou and the others of the younger generation, all yelped in shock. They had developed fear of Ling Han, and their minds had already gone numb with fear upon hearing his voice. Now that they saw him in person, they couldn't help but tremble in terror. Even those at the Shattering Void tier and Immortal level were terrified upon seeing him. This highlighted just how huge an influence Ling Han had on these people. Situ Jian looked toward Ling Han and asked, You're Ling Han? He hadn't experienced the Ling Han era, so he naturally didn't know just how terrifying Ling Han was, nor could he imagine it. Pa! There was a flash and a punch, and Situ Jian's head instantly exploded like a blooming flower. He became a headless corpse. There was deathly silence. Although Situ Jian wasn't the most powerful immortal level elite of the 5 sects, he was still an immortal level elite no matter what. Yet his head had actually been obliterated with a single punch. Gasp! Was this some kind of sick joke? Ling Han smiled widely as he retracted his fist and said, Since you've all arrived, it's time to settle the score. Chapter 1083, Quashing the Rebellion. Chapter 1083, Quashing the Rebellion. Ling Han had returned, and he was incredibly powerful. The members of the 5 sects had already developed a fear of Ling Han, and they could only tremble in fear upon seeing him appear. Now that Situ Jian had been killed, They felt an ominous chill shoot through their bodies. All they wanted to do was turn around and flee. Ling Han, the Sword King, stepped forward. Although he was relatively young in the 5 sects, his strength was quite outstanding. Sword cultivators were renowned for their powerful attacks, and his battle prowess could definitely rank in the top 10 or even top 5 of the 5 sections. Pa! Ling Han swung his fist as he dashed over, and the head of the Sword King was also smashed into pulp. Gasp! Ling Han had killed someone at the slightest of provocations. How ruthless! Ling Han, you've gone too far. You have to realize that there are Sun-Moon tier elites at our ancestral grounds. The Severing Heaven Saber roared. Pa! His head was obliterated just as he finished speaking. Ling Han had killed 3 people in a row, each of them with a single punch. There had been no hesitation, and there had been no mercy. What kind of resolution and killing intent was this? The members of the 5 sects were all shaken to the core. None of them had seen how Situjian and the 2 others had been killed. They had merely seen a flash, and then the elites had died one after another. If they became the target, there was no way they would be able to block or escape, either. How terrifying! Zhang Yimou and the others of the younger generation all trembled in terror. It had only been 2 years, yet what kind of terrifying level had Ling Han advanced to? What cultivation level are you at? The Azure Phoenix Divine Empress asked, a bitter expression on her face. Heh, my improvements have only been minimal. I feel ashamed to tell you guys. Ling Han smiled and said, I'm at the high extreme of the mountain river tier. I've only just broken through to its early stage. Pooh! The rebels all spluttered and choked. You're showing off? You're definitely showing off. He had only opened the sky 2 years ago, and everyone had started off from the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier. However, the members of the 5 sects had cultivation techniques from the Immortal Realm, and it was because of this that 37 people had been able to advance to the Immortal level. But Ling Han? He genuinely had no background, and had even been taken away as a hostage. Are you sure you were a hostage and not some elite son-in-law? Run! It was unclear who cried out, but all of the rebels instantly turned around to flee. The members of the 5 sects were far too familiar with the might of immortal-level elites. They even more so knew that there existed a massive gulf in power between each sub-minor level of the immortal levels. Thus, 1-star geniuses were already outstanding prodigies. However, Ling Han had actually reached the high extreme, so he definitely possessed a crushing advantage over them. Even 370 of them would be annihilated by Ling Han, much less a mere 37. What was the point of fighting? They would definitely be killed if they stayed and fought. Die! The morale of the Great Ling Empire couldn't be any stronger as they charged toward the rebels. The Rain Emperor and the other immortal-level elites were especially fervent as they had just advanced into the immortal level. They were itching to try their hands out. Run! The Azure Phoenix Divine Empress unfurled her wings as she grabbed onto Donglinger. She and Donglinger both possessed unique bloodlines that allowed them to fly after reaching the mountain river tier. This gave them a huge advantage over others at the same cultivation level. The Rain Emperor swung his fist toward them. Although the Azure Phoenix Divine Empress was a bit disheveled after barely managing to block it, she was still able to soar into the sky. Who could stop them from leaving now that they were in the sky? Ling Han, just you wait. You're dead meat once I find my way to the ancestral grounds of the 5 sects. The Azure Phoenix Divine Empress shouted. She knew that the 30 or so immortal-level elites were no match for someone at the high extreme. This wasn't a battle. This was a one-sided massacre. Ling Han shook his head and said, I had planned to spare you as a favor to her, yet you insist on seeking death. He used his body like a bow as he notched the annihilating dragon star arrow. Shio! The arrow transformed into a streak of light as it whizzed through the air. What cultivation level did he possess right now? Even if he didn't use a real bow, and even if he didn't use the ultimate arrow, the might of his annihilating dragon star arrow could still reach 5 stars. How could a mere cultivator at the early stage of the low extreme block a battle prowess at the middle stage of the consummate level? Pooh! The Azure Phoenix Divine Empress and Donglinger both cried out in agony as the arrow pierced through their hearts. The life instantly drained from masters' and disciples' eyes, and the color instantly drained from their faces as they plummeted to the ground. Ling Han didn't pity them in the least. Since they were enemies, what did it matter whether they were men or women? With him and the Azura Demon Emperor present, the 5 sects' advantage in numbers didn't count at all. They still couldn't escape the fate of being massacred. Moreover, although the Rain Emperor and the others had only just broken through, they had been able to comprehend Tao under the reincarnation tree. Which of them hadn't experienced decades of comprehension? Moreover, they had received plenty of resources from Ling Han, with all of them reaching an almost perfect level at the Shattering Void tier. Even Morong Qing had a battle prowess of 4 stars, and the Rain Emperor more so had a battle prowess of 5 stars. In fact, Ling Han didn't even need to act. Just his 3 brothers alone would be able to defeat all of the rebels. In only an hour, all of the elites of the 5 sects had already been killed. Of course, the cultivators at the Shattering Void tier had also followed the immortal level elites over. They were also ruthlessly killed. "Please spare us, Your Majesty." The remaining rebels all dropped to their knees and begged for their lives. Their cultivation level was too low, with none of them having reached the Shattering Void tier yet. They were utterly insignificant in this kind of battle, and just a small shred of power could flatten all of them to the ground. Who would have thought that Ling Han would actually appear at this time? Who would have thought that he'd be as powerful as a deity? This reminded them of when Ling Han had opened the sky. He had borne the weight of the sky as he shattered the heavens, appearing extremely mighty and divine. They had actually tried to rebel against such a person? Fuck. Had they gone retarded? Seize them, take them out the gates and behead them. Ling Han ordered coldly. There were some lines that couldn't be crossed. Otherwise, how would he rule the empire, and how would he control the populace? A thought flashed through his mind, and the cultivation of all the rebels was crippled. The Imperial Guards rushed over and seized the rebels, purposefully punching and kicking them as they did so. Of course, these Imperial Guards hated the rebels. Ling Han had done so much for the lower realm, yet these people actually used the opportunity while he was a hostage to launch a rebellion. Fuck. They genuinely wanted to kill these animals now. Ling Han announced his return through the totem. Taking this opportunity, he also explained the events of the rebellion. His voice boomed through every corner of the great Ling Empire. Long live the Emperor. His Majesty has returned. Everyone whooped in joy. Ordinary people were all realists. They didn't care who was the Emperor as long as their lives were peaceful and plentiful. As long as these were satisfied, the Emperor was a good Emperor. Ling Han had saved them from the fate of being refined into a realm pill. He had saved their lives. He had also taken them into the immortal realm, where spiritual qi was rich. Although not everyone could cultivate, the environment here meant that they wouldn't fall sick, allowing their lifespan to extend by many years. Living to 100 years old was no problem at all. This was a massive favor. Who wouldn't respect such a good emperor? Yet there were actually heartless animals who desired to usurp him. Fuck. Countless people brought eggs, apples, and oranges to witness the executions outside the palace gates. They were going to smash the rebels' faces with rotten eggs and fruits, causing them to stink even in their graves. Ling Han invited Yu Kaiyu, Qian Wu Yong, Hu Fengyue, and his other old friends into the imperial palace. He hadn't wanted to reveal that he had returned before, so he hadn't reunited with these old friends. Now that the survivors of the 5 sects had been dealt with, he naturally had to reunite with these people. Ling Han started to hand out large amounts of alchemical pills again. Chapter 1084, Majestic Heaven Sect. Chapter 1084, Majestic Heaven Sect. A powerful nation couldn't rely on the abilities of only a few people. Ling Han, the Rain Emperor, and the others all strove for great things. This was especially the case for Ling Han, who also had to find the Rock Palace and the ancestral grounds of the 5 sections. How could he remain on the joint peace planet forever? Thus, they had to work hard to groom successors. Since they had split the sky and brought the small world into the immortal realm, they naturally had to give her a brighter future. Everyone improved in leaps and bounds with Ling Han's selfless help. Ling Han had the most hopes for Shan Zhongchun, Xinyuan Ziguang, and Wen Yijian. Xin Zhongqin and Wen Yijian were both supremely talented in martial arts, while Xinyuan Ziguang's heaven-defying fortune hadn't disappeared after he had arrived in the immortal realm. He had somehow obtained some natural treasures, and these had allowed him to become the first of the three to reach the Shattering Void tier. These people didn't seek to compete with Ling Han any longer, and all wanted to place their full focus on cultivation and developing the Great Ling Empire into a behemoth of the immortal realm. Ling Han didn't treat them unfairly, either. It could be said that apart from the reincarnation tree, they enjoyed all the benefits that Ling Han could give them. It was just that without the help of the reincarnation tree, advancing to the immortal level would take them at least 10 years. This estimate was already extremely optimistic. It wouldn't come as a surprise even if it took them several centuries to reach the immortal level. They only had limited resources, after all. As they were followers of Ling Han, Kenyi, Guangyuan, Zhuwu, Yuan Chenghe, and the others were naturally treated better. They could comprehend Tao under the reincarnation tree, and even if Guangyuan and Zhuwu weren't especially talented, cultivating under the reincarnation tree could still help them reach the immortal level even if they were as stupid as pigs, and they couldn't be worse than pigs, right? The alchemist society had become subordinate to the Great Ling Empire, and Ling Han didn't keep his knowledge to himself, either. He imparted his experience and a large number of pill recipes, and believed that once these alchemists developed fully, the development of the Great Ling Empire would enter a positive cycle of growth. At that time, the reliance on him would become much smaller. Lin Xiangqin, Wenren Qianqian, and the other beauties were all happy yet despondent at the same time. They had once had the opportunity to win this godlike man over, yet it was a shame that they had seen their opportunities slip by due to all kinds of reasons and circumstances. Now, they could only look up to him. Another month passed, and Ling Han decided to return to the Scarlet Heaven Academy. He hadn't notified the Academy of his destination when he had left. After all, it would have been extremely troublesome had the Dark Night Hall, Sha Yuan, or Zhao Luan targeted him and sent an elite at the Sun Moon tier after him. However, if he were absent for too long, these powerful forces would definitely still be able to discover his whereabouts. How could the Great Ling Empire stand up against Sun Moon tier elites? Thus, they all decided to return to the Scarlet Heaven Academy as soon as possible. They were still very weak now, yet Ling Han had made far too many powerful enemies. They had to lie low and endure for the time being. The Rain Emperor and the others all teased Ling Han about this, saying, "Fourth brother, although you're tremendously talented, it seems like those that you've offended are even more talented. You're only at the high extreme of the Mountain River tier right now, yet there are at least several elites at the Heavenly Body tier who want to kill you." To this, Ling Han replied, "Those who don't draw jealousy are mediocre people. This proves that I'm supremely talented." Ling Han handed the affairs of the empire to his uncle, Yu Zhenshan. With his help, Yu Zhenshan had already reached the Shattering Void tier. Although this was insignificant in the immortal realm, it was still fairly impressive in the Great Ling Empire. At the very least, his battle prowess could soar to 15 stars after drawing on the power of the nation. Ling Han placed everyone in the Black Tower before setting off on his cloud-piercing shuttle with Shui Yinyu. They landed outside the Point Star City after 10 or so days, and everyone exited the Black Tower and then walked toward the city gates. Since they were going to live in the imperial capital for a long time, they all had to obtain a legal identity. Thus, they naturally had to enter the city gates properly. They entered the city after registering their identities and paying the entrance fee. The Rain Emperor and the others were temporarily settled in the pharmacy. Ling Han would use his power and relationships to help them get into the Scarlet Heaven Academy. He was already quite influential now, so helping others get into the academy was well within his abilities. Although this was an illegal way of entering the academy, the Rain Emperor and the others were all supreme talents. Thus, them entering the Scarlet Heaven Academy was actually a win-win situation. However, another piece of news traveled over before Ling Han could even act on his plan. The Majestic Heaven Sect was recruiting disciples. What kind of force was the Majestic Heaven Sect that news of them recruiting disciples could actually cause the entire city to bubble with excitement? Ling Han asked around, and found that this Majestic Heaven Sect was indeed impressive. the Joint Peace Planet, Flying Cloud Planet, Light Dragon Planet, and another 100 or so planets formed a large galaxy one. The cultivation level of these planets was similar, with the heavenly body tier being the strongest. However, there was a super elite at the Eternal River tier on the Flying Cloud Planet. Not everyone was interested in fame, money, and power, though, and this super elite at the Eternal River tier was respectfully referred to as Venerable Trinity. It was rumored that he had been battling at the passageway of the two realms this entire time, and had only returned to the Flying Cloud Planet several tens of thousands of years ago. He hadn't founded an imperial empire. Empires founded by elites at the Eternal River tier were called imperial empires and had instead founded the Majestic Heaven Sect. He recruited a large number of disciples and students. The founding mission of the sect was to raise prodigies who could battle against the netherworld. It was a large sect with a transcendent standing, and although Venerable Trinity was a super elite at the Eternal River tier, he didn't aspire to become a supreme ruler. Who didn't wish to enter this sect, or perhaps even become a disciple of Venerable Trinity himself? Who didn't desire to listen to him explain the true meaning of the Great Tao? To say nothing of the Eternal River tier, if one could enter this sect, there was a great chance that they could become an elite of the Heavenly Body tier, right? Wasn't this impressive enough? An envoy from the Majestic Heaven Sect had arrived several days ago and notified the three Majestic Empires that the Majestic Heaven Sect was preparing to recruit a new cohort of disciples. When the time came, the Majestic Heaven Sect would send personnel to examine those who had expressed their interest. Those who satisfied the requirements would be recruited as disciples and sent to the Majestic Heaven Sect to comprehend the Great Tao. This examination would take place in 1 month's time. Ling Han scrapped his plans to help the Rain Emperor and the others get into the Scarlet Heaven Academy after learning of this. Wouldn't entering the Majestic Heaven Sect be even better? Ling Han informed the Rain Emperor and the others about this, and they all agreed with his decision. Hee, little Qing, your talents mightn't be enough to get you into the Majestic Heaven Sect, Helian Tianyun said with a chuckle. Morong Qing humphed and said, don't forget that I broke through after reaching 17 stars of the Shattering Void tier. How many stars did you reach? Wayaya. Helian Tianyun roared and said, I directly broke through to the immortal level after activating my ancestral bloodline. If I had cultivated for a few more years, I might have been able to reach 20 stars of the Shattering Void tier, much less 17 stars of the Shattering Void tier. This was his sore spot. Ling Han swept his gaze around. Apart from his 3 brothers, Helian Tianyun and Ding Ping, his cousin Yukayu and his 4 followers Guang Yuan, Kenyi, Yuan Chenghe, and Zhu Ju had all followed him over. Meanwhile, the rock spirit had stayed back to guard the Great Ling Empire. In any case, it could maintain its extremely fast pace of cultivation as long as Ling Han sent some rocks back from time to time. If their aim was to enter the Scarlet Heaven Academy, apart from Guang Yuan and Zhu Wujiu, there would naturally be no problems at all for everyone else. However, if their aim was to enter the Majestic Heaven Sect, everything would be uncertain. How strict were the requirements for entering the sect? Ling Han was confident that he and the Rain Emperor would easily qualify to enter. If even they couldn't enter, then this sect definitely wasn't recruiting prodigies. Instead, they would be recruiting freaks. Ling Han would adjust his plans according to the outcome. Those who qualified would enter the Majestic Heaven Sect, while he would find a way to get those who didn't into the Scarlet Heaven Academy. Ling Han returned to the academy. He planned to visit Old Man Su as there was a possibility that he knew more about the Majestic Heaven Sect. Senior Brother Ling. Senior Brother Ling. However, a fellow student suddenly knocked on his door, appearing extremely short of breath. Chapter 1085, Sword Delivery from Zhihui. Chapter 1085, Sword Delivery from Zhihui. What happened? Ling Han asked. The student hesitated for a moment before answering. I passed by the main gates of the Eastern Institution just then, and I saw someone being cornered by the students of the Eastern Institution. He kept saying that he wanted to visit you. Visit me? Ling Han stroked his chin in thought. Who could this be? Someone who wished to visit him had actually gone to the Eastern Institution? Who didn't know that the 4 major institutions of the Scarlet Heaven Academy were extremely hostile toward one another? Weren't you humiliating the Eastern institution by saying that you wanted to visit Ling Han there? It was evident that this person only knew that he was at the Scarlet Heaven Academy, and not which specific institution he was in. It was because of this that they had accidentally fallen into a wolf's den. Is there anything special about that person? Ling Han asked. The student who had delivered the news pondered for a moment before saying, "He's fairly ordinary." That's right. He's always hugging a sword to his chest. Ling Han was slightly surprised. Could it be Zhihui, the heir to the Swordforge Manor? He had indeed made a promise with Zhihui. If Zhihui succeeded in forging the #1 divine sword in the world, he would personally deliver it to Ling Han. Only a year had passed, yet Zhihui had already succeeded. No matter what, it's best that I head over first. Thanks. Ling Han tossed a vial of pills toward the student who had delivered the news. An excited expression spread across the student's face as he caught the vial and opened it, revealing the emerald green pill inside. Senior brother Ling is so generous. He rewarded me with a heavenly pearl pill for delivering a simple message. Ling Han directly strode into the Eastern Institution's territory, couldn't be bothered walking around to avoid it and headed straight for its main gates. The uniforms of the 4 institutions were all unique in their own ways. Thus, Ling Han quickly attracted the attention and stares of the students from the Eastern Institution once he boldly entered their territory. They all knew who Ling Han was. Not only was his battle prowess impressive, but he had more so become a 7th-rank military officer of the Majestic Empire. First of all, they couldn't defeat him. Second of all, who wanted to offend a prodigy who also had an official rank? As a result, the students simply spectated and followed behind Ling Han, all of them walking with him toward the main gates. The students all wore strange expressions when they realized that Ling Han's destination was the main gate. Fuck, you're not barging into the Eastern Institution simply to take a shortcut, right? Holy fuck, how much are you looking down on the Eastern Institution? This is downright humiliation. The students of the Eastern Institution were all seething with anger. Although Ling Han had neither said a word nor hit a person, the students all felt as if they had been slapped across the face. So high profile, so triggering. How can he be so arrogant? Ling Han, you've gone too far. A powerful student finally appeared and blocked Ling Han's path. Everyone knew that Ling Han was still at the peak stage of the medium extreme now, and they also knew that his battle prowess could perhaps surpass 5 stars. As such, his genuine battle prowess was at the early stage of the consummate level. If one wanted to block Ling Han, this was the minimum cultivation level that they needed to possess. This student was at the early stage of the consummate level, and he could surpass around half a star. His strength was relatively impressive. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "I'm just taking a shortcut because I don't want to walk around." "This is the Eastern Institution," the student shouted sternly. "Regardless of whether it's the Eastern Institution or Northern Institution, they're all part of the Scarlet Heaven Academy," Ling Han said. "I can naturally go wherever I want." A sinister expression appeared on the student's face, and he said, "Since you won't listen to my polite warning, I can only use force." He immediately charged toward Ling Han after saying this. According to Academy rules, students at a higher cultivation level couldn't actively attack students at a lower cultivation level. However, who told Ling Han to barge into the Eastern Institution? He had already barged into someone else's home, so wasn't it only natural that they counterattacked? Thus, what did it matter if he beat Ling Han up? He was the one in the right. Ling Han clasped his hands behind his back. The moment his opponent's attack arrived, he suddenly extended 2 fingers as if they were swords, creating a burst of sword light. Fast technique. After comprehending Tao under the reincarnation tree, Ling Han had already developed a profound understanding of the fast technique. One had to realize that the reincarnation tree had already experienced 4 months, or 120 days, of growth. In other words, comprehending Tao under the reincarnation tree during this time would be equivalent to 120 years. Even with a conservative estimate, this time would be at least 50 years, right? With Ling Han's strong comprehension ability, How could he not grasp the essence of the fast technique after comprehending it for 50 years? Pooh! Blood instantly spurted from the student's chest. Ling Han didn't stop and continued to walk toward the main gate. Only at this moment did the student finally crash onto the floor, unconscious. No one knew whether he had been beaten unconscious by Ling Han or fainted due to anger. Too powerful. The other students were all stunned. That senior brother was an elite at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Yet, Ling Han defeated him in a single strike. How terrifying is his power? More importantly, how many years has it been since Ling Han entered the academy? Most students who entered in the same cohort as him are still striving to have a battle prowess of 20 stars of the Shattering Void tier. But him? His battle prowess has already soared to the consummate level of the Mountain River tier. His battle prowess is at least equivalent to the middle stage of the consummate level. Otherwise, there's no way he could have defeated senior brother in a single strike. No one dared to challenge Ling Han anymore. After all, elites at the consummate level didn't have so much free time to be always strolling around outside. They were always cultivating in seclusion. However, what face would the Eastern institution have if they allowed Ling Han to casually barge through without any obstruction? People instantly went to seek help from other senior brothers and sisters from the consummate level division. They had to stop Ling Han no matter what. The main gates quickly appeared in their sights. Ling Han walked over, and sure enough, he saw several dozen students standing at the gates and surrounding a youth. However, the sword in his hands was already gone. This youth was none other than Zhihui. "Give me the sword back. Give it back!" Zhihui shouted. A silver-haired student standing at the gates had a sword in his hands, and he was the person who Zhihui was currently shouting at. "Senior Brother Yang, what do you think about this sword?" a student asked. "Hee, this person is bragging and saying that this is the #1 sword in the world. However, I don't see anything special about it," a student next to the silver-haired male said. "Haha, the #1 sword in the world? What an absolute joke." The silver-haired male roared with laughter as he waved the sword and said, "This sword is merely forged from level 1 godly metal. Although I can't tell what material it's forged from, I know that it's definitely a level 1 material. Moreover, although there are some divine patterns carved into it, there's no way to activate them. This sword can't even be classified as a level 1 god tool. #1 sword in the world? This is nothing but a trash sword." A furious expression appeared on Zhihui's face, and he shouted, "This is the #1 sword in the world. You don't understand at all. Give it back to me." The silver-haired male chuckled coldly and said, "Haha, although it's a trash sword, it's already in my hands. You still want to take it back? Keep dreaming." This male was called Shuang, and he was a super genius in the consummate level division of the Eastern Institution. "Press him down onto the floor. He actually dared to mention Ling Han's name before my face? He's asking for a beating." Okie dokie. Several students instantly rushed over and pressed Zhihui down onto the ground, forcing him to kneel on his knees. In fact, they even went as far as to force his head into the ground. "Let me go. Give me my sword back," Zhihui shouted. Ling Han shook his head. These people were treating a disciple of the Swordforge Manor so violently. How were they going to get a sword forged from the Swordforge Manor in the future? He strode over with confidence and said, "Brother Jin, long time no see." There was an aura of rage exuding from Ling Han's body. Zhihui was definitely delivering a sword for him as per their agreement. However, he had ended up being humiliated by these people. This infuriated Ling Han immensely. Ling Han. The students at the gates couldn't help but exclaim Ling Han's name. Chapter 1086, Venting Anger. Chapter 1086, Venting Anger. Ling Han was definitely a legend in the Scarlet Heaven Academy. He had only entered the academy for a mere 2 years, yet he had already reached the medium extreme of the Mountain River tier. Moreover, he possessed an astonishing battle prowess, and he was perhaps a legendary 5-star genius. His feats were even more astounding as he had not only fought frequently against the only child of great General Zhao, but he had even had the upper hand when clashing with him. The Empress had more so appointed him as a 7th-rank military officer. Ling Han was the youngest 7th-rank military officer in the history of the Majestic Empire. In fact, many students in the Eastern Institution lamented why Ling Han had entered the academy so soon. If he had entered the Scarlet Heaven Academy 5 years later, wouldn't he have become a prodigy of the Eastern Institution? Yang Shuang faltered for a moment before roaring, "Ling Han, you actually dare to barge into our Eastern Institution?" Ling Han frowned and said, "Release him and return the sword. Then we can speak about other things." "Haha, this person is really your friend?" Yang Shuang chortled loudly and stomped onto Zhihui's face before saying, "What if I don't?" He wasn't afraid of Ling Han, as he had a battle prowess at the late stage of the consummate level. If Ling Han fought against him, he would merely be seeking humiliation. A cold glint flashed across Ling Han's eyes, and he said, "I'll cut off that leg of yours." Yang Shuang roared with laughter. What an absolute joke. Yang Shuang used the sword to point at Ling Han and said, "Ling Han, are you feeling a little too good about yourself? Do you really think that you're invincible in this academy?" Ling Han didn't reply, instead striding toward Yang Shuang. His expression was dark, and his rage had almost become tangible, making it difficult for those around him to breathe. "Beat him to a pulp," Yang Shuang roared. Ling Han was kidding, right? This was the Eastern Institution. Go! The students from the Eastern Institution all charged over. They had actually allowed Ling Han to swagger all the way from the Northern Institution to the main gates of the Eastern Institution. This was utter humiliation, and if the students of the Eastern Institution allowed him to return safely, there would be no need for them to cultivate any longer. They might as well buy a block of tofu and slap themselves to death. A dozen or so fists instantly smashed toward Ling Han. Ling Han activated his divine patterns of gravity with a thought. Pa, 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 pa. The assailants were unable to get near him, and were immediately pressed flat onto the floor by the overwhelming force of extreme gravity instead. Following the increase of Ling Han's cultivation level, his divine patterns of gravity also became more powerful. At the very least, they couldn't be withstood by those under the consummate level of the mountain river tier. He continued forward, and students around him fell like dominoes. Not a single person managed to pose any real threat to him. Unease gripped at Yang Shuang's heart. He was already standing face to face with Ling Han, and there were no more obstacles between the two of them. Theoretically speaking, his battle prowess was higher than that of Ling Han, so he shouldn't have been feeling any unease. However, he was experiencing an indescribable feeling of irritation for some reason, and this made him especially anxious. Kneel down and apologize to Brother Jean. If Brother Jean is willing to forgive you, then that will be the end of this matter. Otherwise, I'll have you know the meaning of the word regret. Ling Han's voice was dripping with malice. Bullsh *T. Yang Shuang flared up in rage. He lifted his foot off Zhihui's face and immediately launched a kick toward Ling Han. Ling Han also threw a kick. Pong! Their legs collided, and both of them stumbled backward. Yang Shuang was stunned, and he stammered, "Why, you broke through to the high extreme." Not only that, but Ling Han's power was actually on par with his. His head went numb with shock. He had cultivation at the middle stage of the consummate level, and his power was identical to his consummate level. His battle prowess could also surpass 1 star. His opponent was only at the early stage of the high extreme, yet his power was already on par with his. What did this signify? This signified that Ling Han's power could surpass 5 stars. On the Joint Peace Planet, 5-star geniuses only existed in legends. It was possible that the Empress was a 5-star genius, though no one had ever proved this to be true. Right now, however, someone was actually able to surpass 5 stars with their power alone. How could Yang Shuang not be shocked? Won't your battle prowess surpass 6 stars if you learn a few more ultimate techniques? Moreover, it's only been 2 years, yet you've already reached the high extreme. How can one cultivate so fast? Kneel down. Ling Han extended his hands toward Yang Shuang. Never, never. Yang Shuang shouted as he counterattacked. He definitely couldn't allow himself to be defeated by Ling Han. Ling Han's fists and palms continued to rain down. They were as powerful as mountains and as fierce as flames. He realized that he had underestimated his own battle prowess. Before he knew it, his power had already reached a stage where it could surpass 5 stars. Add to that his divine patterns of gravity and divine patterns of flame, and his battle prowess was already powerful enough to surpass 6 stars. Of course, this was before taking into account his annihilating dragon star arrow, or the fast technique. At his peak, his battle prowess was completely capable of surpassing 7 stars. In fact, he could even fight against a cultivator at the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier in a fair battle. Taking into account his physique and recovery ability, it was entirely possible for him to claim invincibility in the mountain river tier. Ling Han activated his fast technique and said, "If I want to suppress you, then you can only be suppressed." His strikes were swift and fierce, and as his fingers moved, sword chi swept through the air like swords flying from beyond the highest heavens. Yang Shuang howled in pain as he was continuously struck by Ling Han's attacks. Blood sprayed through the air, and although his wounds were all shallow, he still appeared to be in an extremely sorry state. Even senior brother Yang was being trampled on now. How many people in the Eastern institution could still oppose Ling Han? Peng! Ling Han finally beat Yang Shuang down with a punch. He snatched the sword from his hands before helping Zhihui back up and saying, "Brother Jin, are you okay?" "I'm fine. My wounds aren't severe," Zhihui replied as he crawled up. Several of his bones were broken, but this was nothing serious to cultivators. If one had good quality pills, such wounds could be healed in just a few days. Ling Han nodded before turning back to Yang Shuang and saying, "I said that I would cut off that leg of yours. You didn't think I was joking, did you?" "You dare?" Yang Shuang trembled in fright and said, "This is the Eastern institution. The Academy won't let you off lightly if you commit such acts of violence." Shua! Ling Han unsheathed the sword. There was a flash of sword light, and one of Yang Shuang's legs had already been cut off. "This is my friend. Moreover, this sword was also specially delivered over by my friend. You snatched my sword, so it's only natural that I targeted you. I've already given the Academy face by not slicing your head off. Don't you know that it's a serious crime to steal from officials of the Majestic Empire?" Yang Shuang only remembered to howl in pain after being dazed for a moment. After listening to Ling Han's reasoning, he felt even more gloomy and depressed. Just as Ling Han had said, it was a serious crime to steal from officials of the Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire. However, the matter of him stealing the sword could be severe or insignificant. After all, the sword hadn't been delivered to Ling Han yet. If his battle prowess had been enough to crush Ling Han, would Ling Han still have had the face to ask for the sword to be given back? The problem was, he had actually been defeated by Ling Han. That being the case, he could only swallow the huge loss of having a leg cut off. Fortunately, regrowing severed limbs wasn't anything too difficult for those who had reached the immortal level. One wouldn't be crippled as long as their life force remained uninjured. "Pa!" Ling Han slapped Yang Shuang across the face and said balefully, "Did you think this matter would end so easily? I was merely punishing you for stealing my sword just then. Now, I'm helping Brother Jin vent his anger." "Pa, pa, pa." He continued to slap Yang Shuang across the face. "Pu, pu, pu." Yang Shuang's teeth were all knocked out, and his face was caked with blood. It was a truly devastating sight. "Enough!" A youth dashed over at this moment, his face filled with intense displeasure. Chapter 1087, Broken Yang Shuang. Chapter 1087, Broken Yang Shuang. Senior Brother Tang. The students of the Eastern Institution were all overjoyed upon seeing him appear. They had still been anxious a moment ago, yet they all recovered their confidence now. It was as if his appearance had caused them to suddenly grow a backbone. This youth was none other than Tang Jiu, and his battle prowess was ranked 9th out of all the students in the Eastern Institution. He had a cultivation level at the peak stage of the consummate level, and he could even surpass 3 stars. He was a once-in-10,000 years super genius. On a side note, he was called Tangjiu because his battle prowess was ranked 9th right now. He had been called Tang Shi several decades ago, and there was a possibility that he would be called Tangba or Tangqi and so on in the future one. Release him, Tangjiu said coldly. His eyes were as bright as 2 fireballs, and his exposed arms were covered with crimson divine patterns. These divine patterns extended all the way from the back of his hands to his shoulders and looked as if they had been drawn with some sort of red metal. He was confident, and he was domineering. These were qualities that elites needed to possess. Ling Han trampled young Shuang under his feet. He was treating young Shuang exactly as young Shuang had treated Jin Zhihui, would definitely not let him off lightly. He looked at Tangjiu and said, "Why should I?" "Because Tangjiu said so," Tangjiu said in a sinister voice. He was already seething with fury because Ling Han had actually dared to speak back to him. Ling Han shook his head and said, "Tangjiu, I've never heard of such a person. You're seeking death." Tangjiu didn't speak any more nonsense and immediately charged toward Ling Han. Shua! A chilly light flashed toward Ling Han's throat. A curved bow had appeared in Tangjiu's hands at some point in time, and it had fired a devastating burst of light toward Ling Han. Ling Han threw a kick, launching Yang Shuang into the air. Pooh! The chilly light instantly cut into Yang Shuang's rear, causing blood to spurt through the air. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "Tisk, TSK, TSK. Is there some forbidden love between you two? Why are you aiming for his an asterisk S?" Yang Shuang looked at Tangjiu with an aggrieved expression. "Can't you aim a bit better? Why are you attacking me?" Tangjiu flared up in rage. He jabbed his finger toward Ling Han and shouted, "Release him if you have any balls. Then we can fight without restraint." Ling Han shook his head and said, "This isn't a hostage. Rather, it's my new treasured sword. It can be called a human sword, and it can also be called AB*TCH human one." He was holding onto Yang Shuang's neck, and under the influence of his origin power, Yang Shuang's body could only remain straight and rigid. As such, he was forcefully used as a sword by Ling Han. Yang Shuang wanted to die. Didn't he just snatch Ling Han's sword? Was there a need to humiliate him so much? "Ling Han, your actions make me despise you." Tangjiu tried to provoke Ling Han. "Who are you? Do I need to take your thoughts seriously?" Ling Han scoffed. Tangjiu boiled with anger. Great, he had failed to provoke Ling Han, and had instead ended up being infuriated himself. "You came to cause trouble in our Eastern institution, so we definitely can't let you return in one piece," he threatened viciously. "Junior brother Yang, endure your misfortune. The Academy's face is more important than you." Tangjiu attacked with his full strength, not holding back any longer. Ling Han raised his sword to parry. With his current power, wielding a person was naturally nothing too difficult. Meanwhile, Yang Shuang had descended into an even more wretched situation. Not only did he have to endure Ling Han's sword intent, but he even had to face Tangjiu's relentless attacks head-on. Only a few blows had been exchanged, yet dozens of his bones had already been broken. If this continued, it was entirely possible that he would be killed. Ling Han casually tossed Yang Shuang aside. It would genuinely be excessive if he continued to use him like a sword. Right now, he had only left Yang Shuang with severe injuries. In addition, he was the one in the right. If he killed him, however, the commotion and trouble that followed would be extremely difficult to deal with. There was no need to go so far. "Watch how I smash you into pulp." Tangjiu let out a roar, not caring about anything else. His attacks became even more ferocious and wild. Hee hee. Ling Han chuckled as he unleashed the 7-kill subduing soul technique. Tangjiu's attacks instantly faltered, and he could only muster his defenses hastily as he watched Ling Han's fist smash over. There were relatively few secret techniques that cultivated the divine sense, and this was also the reason for the 7-kill subduing soul technique being so valuable. Although Tangjiu possessed a higher cultivation level, his divine sense wasn't necessarily more powerful than Ling Han's. As a result, His battle prowess instantly fell by a great amount after being struck by Ling Han's divine sense attack. The two of them continued to battle, and Ling Han continuously used his 7-kill subduing soul technique to suppress the battle prowess of his opponent, dragging him down to a similar level as himself. Tang Jie was crazy with rage. His battle prowess was clearly powerful enough to crush Ling Han, yet he was always forced to falter due to the indefensible spiritual attacks from his opponent. This caused his attacks to lose fluidity, resulting in him only being able to unleash 10 to 20% of his full power. He had never felt so constrained in a battle before. He was so vexed that he almost wanted to vomit blood. Meanwhile, the spectating students were all stunned. Is Ling Han trying to defy the heavens? How many stars has his battle prowess surpassed? It isn't Ling Han's battle prowess that's incredible. Rather, this situation is because senior brother Tang's battle prowess has been weakened. But even if it's been weakened, that's still due to the ability of Ling Han. This can also be counted as part of Ling Han's battle prowess, right? The spectating students all exchanged glances. After all, secret techniques pertaining spiritual attacks were far too rare. In fact, they were so rare that barely anyone still cultivated their divine sense to defend against such attacks. That being the case, did this count as Ling Han elevating his tier-surpassing battle prowess? Was his battle prowess at the late stage of the consummate level, or was it 3 stars above the peak stage? The two exchanged a few more blows before Tang Jie angrily leaped to the side. Fuck it. He would go mad if they continued to fight. There was no way for him to unleash his full battle prowess, and this made him feel extremely constrained and uncomfortable. Done fighting? Ling Han asked with a smile. Tang Jie didn't reply, and merely glowered at Ling Han. After a moment, he flicked his sleeves and left. He was genuinely unable to stop Ling Han. Moreover, his opponent had only just advanced to the high extreme, while he had already been at the consummate level for many years. He was completely picking on the weak. He had failed to win, so what was the point of fighting any longer? Tang Jie had left, and the spectating students were all at a loss for words. There were only 8 elites more powerful than Tang Jie, yet none of them were present. They were either training outside or cultivating in seclusion. How could they be casually called over? Them being able to call Tang Jie over was already a pleasant surprise. However, even Tang Jie had been unable to defeat Ling Han. As such, there was nothing more the Eastern institution could do. Ling Han smiled at Zhihui and said, "Brother Jin, let's go." Zhihui nodded and replied, "Mm." The two of them entered the main gates of the Eastern institution just like that. They swaggered through the Eastern institution as they walked toward the Northern institution. The students of the Eastern institution followed behind them, all of them seething with anger and clenching their fists. You two are really treating the Eastern institution as a shortcut. Zhihui was baffled, and he asked, "Brother Ling, why do these people keep following us? Why was I targeted when I said that I wanted to visit you?" Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "Brother Jin, you might not know, but this Scarlet Heaven Academy is actually divided into 4 major institutions." He told Zhihui the reason for him being targeted, and this left the latter feeling extremely vexed. So it turned out that he had brought trouble onto himself. "Brother Jin, is this the sword that you forged?" Ling Han patted his shoulder and pointed toward the sword in his hand. Zhihui's face instantly lit up, and he nodded profusely, saying, "That's right. This is the sword that I forged. The material of this sword is a piece of extraterrestrial meteoric metal, and the Swordforge Manor conducted a lot of tests after obtaining this metal. However, everyone concluded that this was only a level 1 godly metal. However, after investigating it for thousands of years, I reached the conclusion that this is definitely no ordinary level 1 godly metal. Indeed, it's only a level 1 godly metal in its current state. However, it's as if this piece of metal possesses life, and it even has the ability to grow. I investigated it for another tens of thousands of years, and all I was thinking about was how to maintain its growth ability after forging it into a sword. Moreover, I had to maintain the sword's shape and power. And now, I've finally succeeded. Chapter 1088, A divine sword that could grow. Chapter 1088. A divine sword that could grow. Ling Han was surprised. A divine sword that could grow? For cultivators, it was naturally best if they could obtain a high-grade god tool, which they could use for a very, very long time. The Nine Demons sword, for example, could instantly increase one's battle prowess endlessly. But the problem here was, a high-grade god tool would not be easily obtained just because one wanted it, and even if one managed to obtain one, would it be that easy to master? Even the Eternity Sky Emperor lost an arm trying to recover the Nine Demons sword, and that was still because the Nine Demons sword was originally an ancestral weapon of the Chong clan. If it had been another person in his place, even if it was Empress Luan Xing, she would have been unable to collect it. Hence, to settle the matter in one go, to directly wield a god tool till death was practically impossible. Unless there was an elite that used supreme secret techniques to refine and boost a weapon for their descendant day and night. Only then would it be possible that a mountain river tier cultivator could master a god tool of sun moon tier, or even heavenly body tier. However, there were really much too few such cases. Furthermore, this would very easily cause their descendant to become habitually reliant on their god tool, and would be disadvantageous to their personal growth. Ordinarily, cultivators would wield a weapon that corresponded with their own cultivation level, and use their martial intent to nurture it every single day. Over time, their weapon would naturally develop an ego and transform into a god tool. As for the majority of mountain river tier cultivators, they would need a few millennia just to advance a minor level, so they could use the same weapon for a few millennia as well. Hence, there was naturally no need to rush to change their weapon. Ling Han was different, though. His advancement through the cultivation levels was too fast. In 2 years' time, he had advanced into the high extreme of mountain river tier, so he could not possibly nurture any weapon into a god tool. If he had a divine sword that could grow, he could nurture it without worry. If he improved, so would his god tool. He would never have to worry about a day when his god tool would be washed out. Brother Jean, you are truly a genius. Ling Han expressed sincerely. This was definitely a mighty feat. However, Zhihui did not accept Ling Han's compliment and said, I have merely discovered the unique trait of this metal, then thought of a method to forge it so that this unique trait would be preserved. In this whole world, there only exists one such piece of this kind of godly metal, and I would not be able to forge a second sword like this one. The greatest divine sword in the world. Ling Han drew the sword out of his hilt. The coldness exuded by this sword was indeed not all that powerful, and it could only be considered an ordinary weapon. It could not even be considered to be a god tool. How should I improve it? He asked. Through battle. Using this sword to slice other weapons would allow it to swallow their essence, and thus allow it to grow. Zhihui became excited again. Although he could only forge one such divine sword, it was possibly the pinnacle of his whole life of swordsmithing. Ling Han muttered and said, which means, I cannot advance it by skipping levels, and directly use a level 2 or 3 godly metal for instant success? Indeed, you cannot. Zhihui shook his head. You must proceed and progress steadily, just like how cultivators cultivate. Brother Jean, you are really trustworthy. It was obviously me that had obtained a supreme divine sword, yet I still had to trouble you to visit me personally to deliver it, Ling Han said apologetically. Zhihui smiled and replied, This is matter that I had promised you before, Brother Ling. Furthermore, Brother Ling saved my life once before, and is the only person who supported me. If I do not give this divine sword to you, I truly can find no other suitable. Then I shall speak no more pretentious words. Thank you, Ling Han said. Come, let's have a drink. This is my first visit to Point Star City 1, and as the host, you have to entertain me well, Zhihui said, smiling. Ling Han brought him to the pharmacy and beckoned over the Rain Emperor and the others. Then, they ran off to the restaurant, where the whole group got truly plastered. After entertaining Zhihui well for a few days, this maniac of swordsmithing returned to Swordforge Manor. Hi's whole heart was filled with swordsmithing. Although he no longer had the materials to forge a similar sword, He also had lofty aspirations to forge even more precious swords that shattered conventions. Meanwhile, Ling Han bought a great number of pieces of level 1 godly metal. Though Zhihui's words were very amazing, he had truly never heard of this kind of metal that could grow by swallowing the essence of whatever it struck. Hence, he was naturally very curious. Within the Black Tower, Ling Han brandished the divine sword and slashed out at the pieces of metal he had just purchased. Ding, 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 ding. The crisp sound of metal striking sounded out continuously. They were both level 1 godly metal, but the treasured sword had been tempered repetitively, so its toughness was naturally far above that of these pieces of godly metal that had not been tempered before. Thus, under Ling Han's brute force, these pieces of godly metal that had been bought naturally broke apart with a single slash. And Ling Han discovered that in the process that the godly metal had been sliced in half, something indescribable had entered into the divine sword. This kind of change was extremely minute. If this had not been inside the Black Tower, which allowed him to strengthen his senses a few hundredfold, or even a few thousandfold, he could not have possibly sensed such a slight, minuscule change. Small Tower appeared, releasing a shocked exclamation. This luck of yours is really not all too bad. You actually obtained a piece of devouring metal. You know the material used to forge this sword? Ling Han was surprised. Small Tower was extremely proud and said, "Of course." Ling Han sighed and retorted, "Go on. Don't just stop halfway. Do you want to be struck by lightning?" Small Tower humphed and then continued, "The devouring metal is very unique. Its starting point is very low, and it could only be compared to level 1 godly metal. However, it has endless room for improvement. Some have said that it could possibly reach the height of divine metal." Divine metal? Ling Han's heart clenched. He had heard Small Tower speak of divine metal, which was a treasure that exceeded godly metal. Furthermore, divine metal could merely be divided into types, and there was no difference in grade. Every piece of divine metal was an ultimate treasure in itself. There was a chance that this could possibly become divine metal. Fuck, if Zhihui had known this, would he regret the fact that he had presented this treasured sword as a gift? That was possible. Ling Han shook his head. For such a maniac about swordsmithing, being able to forge a treasured sword that could show its might in the whole world was his real dream. If this sword had stayed with him, it'd have practically been like casting a pearl before a swine. However, this is only in theory, Small Tower continued. To increase the grade of devouring metal, the amount of godly metal required would be an extremely huge number. Furthermore, the metal that it swallows in the process of advancing can only be of the same level as its current grade. This practically means that it could not possibly become a divine metal, because at the end, how could there possibly be so much level 20 godly metal in this world? True. Ling Han nodded. From level 5 godly metal onwards, there was pitifully little of the progressive levels. There was similarly little of level 9 godly metal, just like the numbers of heavenly body tier elites. Level 20 godly metal would definitely be as scarce as Genesis tier elites. Where would he find so many pieces of high-grade godly metal for this sword to devour so it could advance? He shook his hand again. This would be something for who knew how many years later, so there was no need to be so anxious and worried yet. Ling Han chopped, and chopped some more, using the treasured sword like a woodcutter's axe. He instilled his own martial intent into it to communicate with this sword. With the passage of time, this divine sword would naturally become capable of communication and become a real god tool. After being chopped by the divine sword a great many times, those slabs of godly metal gradually lost their initial luster, just as if they had turned into scrap metal. True enough, the essence within had been swallowed. Ling Han mumbled to himself. This was actually a bit similar to cultivators. On the path of cultivation, wasn't it all about snatching away the essence of heaven and earth and using such materials to strengthen oneself? Since this sword is going to be by my side for a very, very long time, I'll have to give it a name. What name should I give it that would sound more overbearing? Chapter 1089. Death of a Great Star? Chapter 1089, Death of a Great Star? Ling Han was obviously no expert at naming. Just look at the names he had come up with before. It was practically tragic. It is presently godly metal, and could possibly become divine metal in future, so I'll just name it the Divine Godly Sword. After Ling Han pondered for a while, he abruptly lost interest, and very carelessly came up with a name for this sword. However, wouldn't Divine Demon Sword sound even more awesome? Then we'll just go with Divine Demon Sword. Ling Han had absolutely no principles. In terms of coming up with names, he was really very bad at it. He chuckled as he continued to slash to his heart's content, causing the Divine Demon Sword to grow endlessly. With every slash of the sword, the Divine Demon Sword would experience a slight boost, but the pace of improvement was extremely slow. If it was really to complete a qualitative transformation from level 1 to level 2, a huge number of godly metal would be needed. Thankfully, level 1 godly metal is not really all that valuable for me now. So, I'll just burn money. Ling Han slashed for a total of 3 days and nights within the Black Tower. The godly metal that he had sliced into scrap was uncountable, and he had also exited once in this period of time to replenish his store of godly metal. Finally, after 3 days, the Divine Demon Sword experienced a qualitative change. It had advanced into the same level as level 2 godly metal. Ling Han discovered that in the process of this qualitative change, the Divine Demon Sword's accommodation for his martial intent also reached the pinnacle. In a short instant, he actually managed to brand 7 divine patterns within the sword. This caused Ling Han incredible surprise. It had to be known that using one's martial intent to leave behind a brand inside one's weapon, expressed through the form of divine patterns, was a very long process. After all, that was stimulation through one's willpower, and not origin power. Thus, nurturing a god tool would be a matter of a few decades or centuries at least. Yet, when the Divine Demon Sword was experiencing this qualitative change, it seemed to have turned into a piece of blank paper, allowing Ling Han to draw on it as he liked. Instantly, he had branded 7 divine patterns on it. How could this possibly not make Ling Han pleased? Now, the toughness of the sword's body has reached the level of level 2 godly metal, and the power of the Divine Demon Sword is comparable to a level 1 god tool. This meant that if he did not awaken the Divine Sword, and merely used its own power to strike, the Divine Demon Sword would only be an ordinary level 2 godly weapon and not a god tool. However, if he awakened the power of the Divine Demon Sword, it could allow it to unleash battle prowess of a level 1 god tool. I still have to continue improving so that it can be on the same level as my abilities. Otherwise, if it collided against a level 3 or level 4 god tool, it would very possibly snap in half, and he would have to seek out Zhihui to repair it. If he recklessly joined the two halves together again, it could possibly ruin the unique trait of the devouring metal. If it had been easy, how could Zhihui have gone to so much trouble and spent more than 10,000 years just to create this Divine Demon Sword? But I don't have any money left. I'm so poor. AI. Ling Han sighed. Previously, when he had bought level 1 godly metal, he had practically spent all his savings. Now, even though he still had a small number of true origin stones left, how many pieces of level 2 godly metal would he be able to be purchased? No wonder Small Tower said that only theoretically was there a possibility that the devouring metal could complete a qualitative change into divine metal. By the end, he would probably have to find all the level 20 godly metal in the entire immortal realm, and only then would he be able to make the devouring metal complete the final leap. Oh right, couldn't the Black Tower also produce godly metal as well? The Black Tower could produce a piece of godly metal every year, just like how it could produce spirit stones. However, if this piece of godly metal was not taken out, its grade would improve by a certain amount every year, and this caused Ling Han to hesitate. That was because even 100 low-grade pieces of godly metal could not match a single piece of high-grade godly metal. Forget it. In any case, the amount of level 2 godly metal that I need would also be great, so I will not go with that idea, Ling Han thought. As a human, he had to set his sights further. Since I'm out of money, I will have to work hard at concocting alchemical pills. Ling Han decided to first slow down the advancement of his cultivation level. In any case, he had the reincarnation tree, with which a single day was comparable to spending a year in normal meditation. He also had the demonic power source meant there was no need for him to consider the accumulation of origin power before the sun-moon tier, so he could indeed spend some time on alchemy. He worked hard at concocting as he waited for the Majestic Heaven Sect to accept disciples. Shui Yinyu would frequently come to cultivate and try to improve her cultivation level as far as possible, so she naturally had to borrow the spot at the reincarnation tree. Her target was very clear, and that was to be chosen by the Majestic Heaven Sect so that she could stay with Ling Han. Otherwise, who knew how long it would be until she next saw this damn pervert? Furthermore, this guy's brightness could definitely not be concealed wherever he went, so she would have to keep him in her sight to avoid any other woman taking advantage of her absence. However, her talent in martial arts was not all that high, and her tier-surpassing battle prowess was merely 2 stars as well. In the Scarlet Heaven Academy, that was considered very awesome, but the disciples that the Majestic Heaven Sect took in were definitely the cream of the crop from every great planet, and 2 stars won were definitely not enough. Thus, if she wanted to enter into the Majestic Heaven Sect, she would have to depend on something else. Her age and cultivation level. Mountain River tier cultivators were definitely not rare in the Majestic Heaven Sect. However, what about a cultivator who was in the high extreme in Mountain River tier, or even consummate level, yet below 40 years old? Then, even if she did not have much tier-surpassing battle prowess, she could fall into the category of top geniuses. My ability of surpassing my tier in battle prowess was not as strong as yours, but my rate of cultivation was faster than yours, and my cultivation level was superior to yours as well, so I could still dominate you. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh loudly as he grabbed this captivating, seductive beauty with a move and said, "Wife, your regard has touched me very much. Come, give me a kiss." Shui Yinyu rolled her eyes at him and said in annoyance, "I only want to enter the Majestic Heaven Sect to improve, so what relation has that with you?" This woman was really easily embarrassed. Ling Han chuckled and said, "Wife, my wife, this part of you is the only bad thing about you. You continue to be unwilling to admit that you have been conquered by my charms. But that's all right. I like slowly teaching you, and enjoy this process." "Ah?" Shui Yinyu exclaimed in surprise. This guy was again groping her all over, and without doubt, the place he occupied was naturally her 2 breasts. She was both embarrassed and irritated as she exclaimed, "Damn pervert, don't be like this." "Don't be like what?" Ling Han snickered. In truth, Shui Yinyu's asterisk was also filled with beauty. The angle of her fullness caused his desire to be incited greatly, and he couldn't help but stretch out his hands as he kneaded them to a different shape continuously. A terrifying shock wave rolled over them, causing the couple to simultaneously pause, and they raised their heads to look at the sky. The bright moon was in the middle of the sky, but a great star suddenly appeared amidst all the brightly shining stars. It was releasing an incredibly majestic light. No, it was more akin to a fountain that was spewing out brilliant light, brightening the whole sky. Boom! Another powerful feeling of lingering fear was felt. For some reason, the couple was sure that it had to have been caused by that great star, and related to the light that it was currently spewing out. What star is this? Could it be that it has come to the end of its natural lifespan and is about to release its last brilliance? The immortal realm was completely different from a small world. A small world only had a large mainland, and the stars in the sky were actually multiple meteors, which elites could easily cause to fall. In the immortal realm, however, every star was a great star one, or could even be a sun, burning with divine flame. It could burn elites of heavenly body tier to nothing, and even great elites of eternal river tier would not dare to barge onto them. Every great star had its own lifespan, but it was as long as a few dozen 100 million, or even billions of years. It was difficult for even elites of the heavenly body tier to see a great star come to the end of its lifespan. It was only known that when a great star finally died, there would be a huge explosion. It was extremely terrifying. Just imagine how many cultivators could be cultivated by a great star. Yet this power would be set off in the short time of a few breaths. Probably even heavenly body tier cultivators would be insta-killed. This was power that could be world-destroying, and only Genesis tier elites would be able to contend against power of such astronomical level. Now, a great star in the sky suddenly shone brilliantly, so it was very possible that it had come to the end of its life. Chapter 1090 Large Tomb Among the Stars. Chapter 1090 Large Tomb Among the Stars. Wait, no. Shui Yinyu shook her head and said, there shouldn't be any stars at that location. Ling Han was a bit unsure, and he asked, are you certain? Shui Yinyu nodded her head seriously and said, I'm certain. Her talent in cultivation was indeed far below that of Ling Han. However, she liked to read all kinds of books, so in terms of knowledge, she definitely knew far more than Ling Han. How strange. Then what on earth is that thing? Both of them looked at the sky where the large star continued to emit a dazzling radiance. Waves of energy fluctuated toward every corner of space. Such fluctuations were powerful enough to affect all beings in the nearby galaxies. The next day, everyone was discussing the large star that had appeared the previous night. This was a truly astonishing event. Generally speaking, stars couldn't be seen in the morning. This was because the light from the sun was far too bright and dazzling. Now, however, that large star could still be seen. The light that radiated from it didn't seem bright at all, yet it was somehow able to shine through the brilliant radiance of the sun. Everyone was engaged in spirited conversations, curious as to where this large star had come from. They had never seen a star in that location before, and it was as if this large star had suddenly appeared out of thin air. A large star could appear out of thin air. This was absolutely unfathomable. Numerous forces instantly sent starships into the vast universe, wanting to investigate the large star from a closer distance. Starships were different from warships. These were transport tools specifically used to travel around the universe. The materials that they were made from and energy source that they used were all of far higher quality than those of warships. After all, warships were fine as long as they could fly. If warships were something that could be made by any force willing to grit their teeth and use some resources, then starships were something that only belonged to truly powerful forces. This was because they were extremely expensive, both in terms of construction and in terms of maintenance. In any case, who would travel into the universe for no reason? If one wanted to travel from one large star to another large star, the travel time could easily extend into years. If the stars were further apart, this time could even blow out to hundreds, or perhaps even thousands of years. Few people were willing to stay in the boring and lonely universe for so long. Only a mere few days had passed, yet a starship had already returned with an important piece of news. No, it was more accurate to describe this as a stunning piece of news. That large star was actually a tomb. What? Ling Han was, of course, shocked upon hearing about this. A tomb had actually appeared among the stars? This was already an extremely uncanny situation to begin with. However, what was more surprising was the fact that they could see this tomb from so far away. Just how large was this tomb? Even if a mountain were tossed into the universe, one would be unable to see it after traveling suitably far away. Even Ling Han, with his eye of truth, wouldn't be able to see it. So, just how large was this tomb? Ling Han couldn't help but feel curious. He suddenly wanted to head over and have a look for himself. Ling Han wasn't the only one who felt like this, with even the Majestic Heaven Sect sending out a notice about pushing the Sect entry exam back by an indefinite amount of time. They were going to send a team to explore that large tomb first. All of the forces treated this matter with extreme seriousness, and those that owned starships were already bustling around and preparing to head over for exploration. This large tomb among the stars was a gigantic treasure trove, no matter how one looked at it. However, only a few super-powerful forces owned starships. Would ordinary people have the right to catch a free ride? Of course not. However, it wasn't only the heavenly body-tier forces that owned starships. Traveling merchants also owned starships. Some merchants did interplanetary business, meaning that they had to travel back and forth between planets in order to deliver resources and purchase specialty products. There were huge profits to be made from these businesses, of course. As mentioned before, traveling between planets consumed an exorbitant amount of time. And there was also a possibility that one would come across unpredictable space storms. Such storms would bury their victims in the dark universe, never to return home again. Merchants were especially good at seizing opportunities, and they immediately opened a new route to ship people to the large tomb. However, this required the purchase of a ticket, each costing a whopping 10,000 true origin stones. This was dear enough to scare most people off. Even so, demand for these tickets was still greater than the supply. They were sold out in an instant. One had to realize that even the Empress, the 7 generals, and the left and right ministers were actively preparing to enter the large tomb. This highlighted just how astonishing the opportunities on the large tomb were. Ling Han managed to purchase 2 tickets, one for himself and one for Shui Yinyu. Of course, he would also bring the Rain Emperor and the others over. However, they would all have to stay in the Black Tower first. Once Ling Han arrived at the large tomb, he would decide what to do according to the situation there. Numerous starships soared through the sky. It wasn't only the chaotic star's Majestic Empire that was active, with the superforces of the other 2 Majestic Empires also joining in on the expedition. Of course, these Majestic Empires would still leave some elites to guard their land, just like how the chaotic star's Majestic Empire had left the 9 kings. There were still a few days until Ling Han's starship set off, so he decided to pay Old Man Su a visit first. He had decided on this quite some time ago. However, his plans had been affected by Zhihui's sudden visit. He had upgraded his divine demon sword after that, and then put all of his effort into refining pills. These all pushed his plan back. When he arrived at the library, it was already quiet and not busy like normal. Most people had probably done everything in their abilities to get a ticket to the large tomb. Those who hadn't left yet were probably preparing to leave. As such, who had the time to visit the library? Senior. Ling Han walked over and respectfully greeted Old Man Su. He owed this old man far too much. Which of the 7 kill subduing soul technique and universal 8 desolation technique wasn't a supreme secret technique? Even a master mightn't necessarily teach such secret techniques to their disciple. However, Old Man Su had taught him, and all he had asked for was a promise. Old Man Su was currently napping, and he opened his eyes upon hearing Ling Han's greeting. He turned around with a look of astonishment on his face and said, "How is your cultivation speed so fast?" Although Ling Han didn't know how powerful Old Man Su was, he held a firm belief that his cultivation level was definitely profound. Thus, it didn't come as a surprise to him that Old Man Su could detect his cultivation level with a single glance. He chuckled and said, "I came across some rare opportunities." Old Man Su didn't press him about what rare opportunities he had come across. His expression became serious, and he said, "Lad, don't focus all of your attention on improving your cultivation level. If you want to reach a profound height, you must ensure that each step you take is firm and unwavering. Don't be greedy and bite off more than you can chew. Otherwise, you'll only end up ruining your own future." Faithful words grated upon the ears. Ling Han instantly became solemn, and he said, "Thank you for your reminder, Senior. I'll definitely keep your words in mind." Old Man Su nodded before smiling and saying, "Your foundation is strangely stable even though your cultivation speed is so unbelievably fast. Even I'm a little stumped." This wasn't all that surprising, as Ling Han had a reincarnation tree in his Black Tower. Comprehending Tao for a day with it was equivalent to comprehending Tao for a year, so how could his cultivation level not be stable? Ling Han simply smiled. Him being grateful toward Old Man Su was one thing, but him revealing all his secrets was another. In reality, he knew almost nothing about Old Man Su, so how could he reveal the secrets of his Black Tower and his reincarnation tree? "Since your cultivation speed is so fast, this old man will also remind you earlier lest you find out too late," Old Man Su said. "Remind me about what?" Old Man Su didn't answer, instead asking, "In your opinion, what's the maximum number of stars a cultivator can surpass?" Is this even a question? 4-star geniuses are already incredibly rare, and 5-star geniuses only exist in legends. This is a widely acknowledged fact. However, Ling Han knew that his battle prowess was definitely above 5 stars. Right now, just his power alone could already surpass 5 stars. If he unleashed all of his other abilities, even surpassing 7 stars was no problem at all. Chapter 1091, 10-Star Genius. Chapter 1091, 10-Star Genius. Senior, there are preconditions regarding how many stars one can surpass. Ling Han thought for a moment, before continuing. Take me, for example. If I meet someone who's 9 stars above me, let's call them Person A. Person A hasn't practiced any techniques to defend against divine sense attacks. Thus, if I use the 7-kill subduing soul technique to attack Person A and suppress their battle prowess, my chance of defeating them is at least 50%. In such a case, I would have the ability to surpass 9 stars. However, if I meet another person, let's call them Person B, and their battle prowess is only 8 stars above mine, it's still extremely likely that I'll lose if there's someone who has practiced techniques to defend against divine sense attacks. In such a case, I wouldn't even have the ability to surpass 8 stars. However, if Person B hasn't practiced divine sense attacks, they'll naturally be unable to defeat Person A. This leads to a strange cycle. I can defeat Person A can defeat Person B, and Person B can defeat me. As such, I really don't know how to rate my battle prowess. Old Man Su laughed heartily and said, very well indeed. You're already able to consider such kinds of scenarios. Just like how the Shattering Void tier is determined by power, the battle prowess of the immortal levels is also built upon power. After all, power is the absolute fundamental. When talking about star-surpassing geniuses, power is the measurement that's used, not battle prowess. Of course, having more power doesn't necessarily guarantee victory. There's nothing surprising about this. Thus, when talking about star-surpassing geniuses, we're simply measuring one's battle prowess from the perspective of their power. In any case, power is the most important attribute. Without power, everything else is useless. Ling Han nodded in agreement. If 2 people possessed the same power, yet they practiced different secret techniques of varying might, it was only natural that there would be significant differences in their strength. This had nothing to do with whether one was a genius or not, nor did it have anything to do with how much effort one exerted. Rather, it had everything to do with the secret techniques and cultivation techniques that one practiced. By this measure, Ling Han was a 5-star genius. However, this wasn't his limit. He noticed that his power was still growing at a rate that exceeded his cultivation level, and there was a possibility that it had reached 6 stars. When you were at the Shattering Void tier, you attained a power of 20 stars, Old Man Su said. This means that you reached a level of perfection in the previous tier. Otherwise, there's no way you could have reached 20 stars of the Shattering Void tier. However, if you cultivate to the peak stage of the consummate level of the Mountain River tier, just like this, your power will only be able to surpass 6 stars at most. 6 stars. Was this not impressive enough? 5-star geniuses only existed in legends. In fact, there was a possibility that such legendary geniuses relied on secret techniques and were unable to reach such a height with their own abilities. Lad, the vast nature of the universe is beyond your wildest imaginations. In the immortal realm, prodigies are nothing rare. Old Man Su shook his head and continued, when I was young, I once traveled far and wide and witnessed countless prodigies. Only then did I realize that I had been watching the sky from a well. Ling Han nodded and said, please enlighten me, senior. A satisfied smile appeared on Old Man Su's face. This young man was neither arrogant nor impatient. It was no wonder that his cultivation was so fast and outstanding. A look of reminiscence flashed across his face, and it was a long time before he said, the limit of cultivation should be 10 stars. Pooh! Ling Han almost choked. 5-star geniuses were already the things of legends, yet he was being told that the limit was actually 10 stars? Moreover, the 10 stars that Old Man Su spoke of was definitely in terms of power alone, and not the result of practicing secret techniques. Was this possible? 10 stars? He was already freakish enough, having cultivated each of his cultivation levels to a perfect state. However, just as Old Man Su had said, he could only reach 6 stars at most. This was only a tad more than halfway to 10 stars. If you want to challenge cultivators a major tier above you, then you must become a 10-star genius. Old Man Su spoke unhurriedly and continued. This is a gulf that even 9-star geniuses can only look up to. Even if you're a 9-star genius at the peak stage of the consummate level of the Mountain River tier, you can only lower your head before those at the early stage of the low extreme of the Sun Moon tier. Ling Han couldn't help but feel fervent with excitement. He had never heard of a Mountain River tier cultivator defeating a Sun Moon tier cultivator before. However, if he could become a 10-star genius, he would be able to make the impossible possible. Of course, this came with a condition: one had to be at the peak stage of the consummate level of the Mountain River tier, and their opponent had to be at the low extreme of the Sun Moon tier. Otherwise, it would be futile even if one were a 10-star genius. Ling Han was slightly confused, and he said, "But Senior, you said that I've already reached a level of perfection in each of my cultivation levels. Even so, I can only reach a power of 6 stars. Wasn't this an impossible task?" Old Man Su laughed heartily and said, "Young lad, have a little more patience." He stood up and said, "Follow this old man for a walk." The two of them entered the dense forests by the lake again, and Old Man Su said, "The so-called consummate level of the Mountain River tier is not actually the consummate level." Ling Han was instantly startled. Not the consummate level? The true pinnacle of the Mountain River tier is 5 mountains and rivers, not 4. Old Man Su finally revealed an astounding secret. Ling Han's mouth gaped open in shock. It was a publicly acknowledged fact that the Mountain River tier had 4 minor tiers. Everyone cultivated according to this paradigm, and they would start to form their sun and moon after cultivating 4 mountains and rivers. In other words, they would begin their breakthrough to the next cultivation level. Just then, however, he had been told that one could actually form 5 mountains and rivers. Then was it possible to form 6 or even 7 mountains and rivers? 5 is the genuine pinnacle of the Mountain River tier. It's impossible to form any more mountains and rivers. Old Man Su shook his head and continued. This is equivalent to advancing an extra minor tier, and it's the only way to become a 10-star genius. Ling Han was puzzled again, and he asked, "Then isn't there a void between 6 stars and 10 stars? Where did all the 7, 8, and 9-star geniuses go?" Old Man Su laughed loudly and said, "Did you think that one would have certainly reached the pinnacle after forming 5 mountains and rivers? Some are only able to form the mountain, while others are able to form both mountain and river, yet cannot cultivate them to perfection. Thus, these people become 7, 8, and 9-star geniuses." "So that's how it is." Ling Han faltered for a moment before asking, "So, based on what you said, Senior, can Sun-Moon tier cultivators also form 5 suns and moons? Can Heavenly Body tier cultivators also form 5 heavenly bodies? Then shouldn't there be 11 and 12-star geniuses?" "Brilliant question." Old Man Su chuckled and said, "However, you've gotten one thing wrong." He raised a finger and said, "One can only maintain a power of 10 stars if they reach the true pinnacle of each cultivation level. Otherwise, one's power will fall if they fail to reach the pinnacle for any one cultivation level. In such cases, they'll become 9, 8, or 7-star geniuses." Ling Han nodded in understanding. So, maintaining a power of 10 stars was actually this difficult. One had to reach the true pinnacle of each major tier. "Senior, have you ever seen a 10-star genius before?" Ling Han asked. A ferocious glint flashed past Old Man Su's eyes, and even his face shuddered a little. He only regained his composure after a long while, saying, "I've never seen one with my own eyes. However, I've heard about a few supreme prodigies who are genuinely invincible in their own cultivation level. These supreme prodigies are called young king tier cultivators." Ling Han was astonished. Not only did such cultivators exist, but there were even a few of them. How was this possible? One had to realize that it was necessary to receive the blessing of heaven and earth should one want to attain a power of 20 stars of the Shattering Void tier. Otherwise, one would only be able to reach 17 stars. The remaining 3 stars were on another level altogether. Old Man soon noticed his confusion. With a smile, he said, "Do you think it's hard for great elites in the immortal realm to send their clan members into small worlds to open the sky?" Chapter 1092, Blurry Tombstone. Chapter 1092, Blurry Tombstone. Ah! Ling Han's body shuddered violently. Indeed, that was completely possible. One could open the sky and re-enter the immortal realm, thereby gaining the last 3 stars of power and reaching a perfect state of humanity. Ling Han couldn't help but sigh. These people truly had good fathers. Otherwise, they would have already lost at the starting line. I'm telling you this because I don't want you to advance too greedily. If you want to become a king-tier cultivator, you must reach a level of perfection for each cultivation level. Otherwise, others at the same cultivation level will have an inherent advantage over you should their power be stronger than yours. Moreover, in terms of god tools and rare treasures, how can you compete against descendants of Eternal River tier and Genesis tier elites? Ling Han nodded in agreement. In terms of resources, he was definitely no match for the descendants of elites. That being the case, he could only strive to improve and aim to reach the true pinnacle for each of the cultivation levels. "Thank you for your advice, Senior," he said sincerely. If it weren't for Old Man Su's advice, he would have definitely started to break through to the next major tier after reaching the consummate level. As such, he would only be a 6-star genius. Even if he were to reach the pinnacle of the following major tier, he would still only be a 9-star genius at most that would never have the chance to become a 10-star genius. Old Man Su nodded in acknowledgement and said, "Farewell." It appeared as if he had said everything that he wanted to, and had no interest in speaking any longer. "Then I'll visit you again later." Ling Han bowed respectfully before turning around to leave. Although Old Man Su had only told him some secrets, these secrets were hugely important to his future. The gulf between a 6-star genius and a 10-star genius was tremendous. To most prodigies, however, knowing or not knowing this secret was of no significance at all. This was because reaching the pinnacle of each cultivation level was far too difficult. Moreover, if one hadn't reached the pinnacle of humanity, it would be impossible for them to reach 10 stars even if they formed 5 mountains and rivers and 5 suns and moons. Reaching 10 stars required one to attain perfection in each and every cultivation level. Even a small step down from perfection would drop one to 9 stars. Ling Han believed that the Rain Emperor had the potential to become a 9-star genius. Feng Piyun was slightly less talented and could perhaps become an 8-star genius. Meanwhile, Murong Qing mightn't even be able to form 5 mountains and rivers, nor 5 suns and moons. He had only reached a power of 17 stars of the Shattering Void tier anyway, so his potential was most likely limited to 4 stars. The gap between prodigies hadn't shrunk after they arrived in the immortal realm. Rather, it had grown. 3 days passed, and Ling Han and Shui Yinyu finally boarded their starship. They were about to depart at any moment. The starship was huge, truly huge. Warships could be built in a small size, much like the cloud-piercing shuttle, which could only seat 2 people. However, starships were at least as big as half of a city. Otherwise, it would be impossible to engrave the humongous formations that were necessary to travel through the galaxy. If such formations didn't exist, how would they defend against meteoroids or other space dangers? When these formations were activated, they could even block the attacks of great elites at the heavenly body tier for a while. This would give the starship enough time to escape. However, even though the starship was so gigantic, it was still brimming with people right now. It wasn't long before the starship soared into the air and flew into the galaxy. Of course, starships also came in varying qualities. In terms of performance, this merchant starship was only SOSL. The starship that had left before them had made a return trip in a mere 5 days. However, the starship that Ling Han was on still hadn't neared the large tomb after 5 days of flight. It took another 2 days before they finally arrived near the large tomb. Meanwhile, the nearby space was already fully docked with starships. Ling Han and Shui Yinyu walked to the deck to observe their surroundings. There were defensive formations enveloping their starship, producing a light gravitational field to mimic the natural environment of their planets. The only difference was that there was no breathable air. Fortunately, breathing wasn't necessary after one reached the immortal level. If someone who wasn't at the immortal level came over, they would simply be seeking death. A gigantic hemisphere lay before them. Great stars were all spherical, yet the gigantic body before them looked like a star that had been sliced apart, with only half of its body remaining. As such, it looked much like a tomb. Moreover, the city-sized starship was only like a mere ant before this ginormous tomb. There was absolutely no comparison. "It's not light that's being emitted, it's life essence," someone shouted in astonishment. The people on the starship were all astounded. How valuable was life essence? It was life essence that determined how long one could live. However, life essence could only be produced by oneself. Even if one were to snatch another being's life essence, they would only be able to benefit their own cultivation. It would be impossible to raise the amount of their own life essence. When one's life essence ran out, they would die. This was nature itself. Right now, however, this large tomb was spitting out a limitless amount of life essence. How could they not be stunned? If it were possible to cultivate atop this large tomb, the effects would definitely be jaw-dropping. However, this was a tomb, so shouldn't it have been lifeless and spiritless? Why was it exuding such astonishing amounts of life essence? This made absolutely no sense. Heh, a large tomb mysteriously appeared in the galaxy. Does this make any sense? This was genuinely a large tomb. There was even a tombstone on top of it. The tomb was already ginormous, so the tombstone was naturally of a shockingly large size as well. Stone slabs were a common sight, but since when had there been such a gigantic singular piece of stone? This tombstone was taller and larger than any mountain that they had seen. No one could see any cut marks on the stone. Meanwhile, there were only two extremely blurry words engraved into the tombstone. No one could read them, however. Who was mighty enough to build such a large tomb in the Galaxy 1? This had probably been a planet before, right? It had been forcefully refined into a large tomb to bury someone. Hang on, why can't I remember those two words? Someone yelped in surprise. They had clearly seen the two words on the tombstone before, even though they were blurry and incomprehensible. However, the person had instantly forgotten the image of the two words after turning around. This was far too uncanny. I can't remember them either. It seems like there's some mysterious force erasing these words from our memory. Everyone was astonished and excited. Just the tombstone alone was already so mysterious. That being the case, how many treasures did the tomb contain? The large tomb was mighty and magnificent, exuding an aura of life essence from its body. Meanwhile, there was an entrance that was enveloped in a fog of chaos on its front side. It was as if heaven and earth one had just come into being there. No one was able to see through the fog. No wonder the Empress and even the Majestic Heaven Sect were startled into action. This large tomb is far too mysterious and surprising. Some people tried to ascend the large tomb, yet apart from the entrance on the front side, descending toward other places would only lead to one fate: exploding into bits. Some heavenly body tier elite activated their treasure and attempted to near the tomb, yet their treasure was directly blown into smithereens. That elite also had half of their body blown off, yet they luckily managed to survive. This rendered the other elites speechless. By the looks of it, forcing their way in would be impossible. Perhaps Venerable Trinity could try, but he was always in the Majestic Heaven Sect. In fact, he had never left the sect before. However, it wasn't easy to enter via the main entrance, either. The fog of chaos enveloping it was as heavy as a star, and one's bones would instantly creak and groan upon coming under its pressure. If one took a few more steps, they would definitely be flattened into a pancake. What could they do? Everyone knew that this large tomb was filled with opportunities. Perhaps it was the tomb of an Eternal River tier elite, or perhaps it was the tomb of a Genesis tier elite. If they could obtain the treasures of this supreme being, hee. However, no one could enter the tomb right now. Thus, What did it matter that the tomb was filled with treasures? That fog of chaos is dissipating, a powerful figure said. It was a heavenly body-tier elite of the older generation. He had come from the domineering sun planet and was already more than 30 million years old. His life was nearing its end, and thus he had come here prepared to die at any moment. If he couldn't find an opportunity to break through to the eternal river tier, he would be halfway through death's door. Meanwhile, the fog of chaos was slowly dissipating. Just as he had said, the large tomb was about to open. Chapter 1093, Entering the Large Tomb. Chapter 1093, Entering the Large Tomb. It was almost impossible to cultivate in space, as no spiritual chi existed there. One could only replenish their power through true origin stones. Alchemical pills would also work, though this was much more luxurious. Ling Han was an exception. There were far too many people here, so no one would notice if a few people disappeared. Thus, he could enter his black tower and cultivate under the reincarnation tree whenever he wanted. The Rain Emperor and the others were also cultivating under the reincarnation tree. They replenished their power using true origin stones, and they increased the speed of their cultivation by taking alchemical pills. Thanks to the existence of the reincarnation tree, they didn't need to worry about this affecting their growth, either. Ling Han focused on refining pills. He could only purchase godly metal if he had enough money, and he could only raise the level of his divine demon sword if he had enough godly metal. Not having enough money seemed like an eternal problem. However, even though he wasn't cultivating, his progress was the quickest out of everyone. There was nothing surprising about this. After all, he had a wisp of a demon master's essence in his body. This continually provided him with an essence power, causing his cultivation to progress even when he was sleeping. As long as he spent some time comprehending Tao under the reincarnation tree every day, his cultivation level would be able to match his mind and comprehension. There wasn't any risk or danger. He would be able to reach the middle stage of the high extreme after another month or so. Time trickled, and the fog of chaos enveloping the main entrance gradually dissipated, revealing the entrance to an abyss. From afar, this entrance looked like a passageway. However, it was actually shockingly huge. It was like an ocean, and even starships would be able to navigate inside easily. It merely looked small due to the humongous size of the large tomb. The great elites conducted numerous experiments, attempting to navigate unmanned starships into the entrance. After several attempts, they finally managed to succeed. Instantly, the starships all headed toward the entrance. The city-sized starships were like ants crawling into a mug when they flew into the entrance. The disparity in size was simply astounding. Everyone was filled with anticipation. This was a tomb built among the stars, a tomb carved from a planet. What kind of supreme figure was buried in this tomb? Meanwhile, Ling Han sighed with emotion. So what if one was at the Genesis tier? They would still reach the end of their life one day. In the end, their greatness and might would eventually transform into dirt on the ground. Were there truly eternal beings in the world? The starship had already navigated through the entrance as he pondered this. The interior was pitch black, and only the light radiating from the starship illuminated a small region in the surroundings. He immediately felt a soft body leaning against him. It was none other than Shui Yinyu. Ling Han wrapped his arms around this seductive beauty and said, "Don't worry, I'll look after you." Shui Yinyu nodded. In fact, she had rarely ever ventured out for training. Before such a magnificent and mighty structure, she couldn't help but feel incredibly small and insignificant. The starship continued forward, and after flying for a few more hours, it arrived before a continent. A continent appearing in a large tomb was extremely strange. However, this was possibly the tomb of a great elite. So was the existence of a continent really all that extraordinary? Great elites naturally had their own abilities. The starships that had arrived earlier had already docked in especially neat rows. Many people had already disembarked and were currently exploring the continent. The surroundings were dimly lit in this place, though this was enough for immortal-level cultivators to see clearly. There's actually breathable air. Ling Han took a deep breath. Although he didn't need to breathe, breathing had already become a habit, so he would still breathe whenever he could. It wasn't necessary, yet it would make him feel much more comfortable. Be careful. Shui Yinyu nudged him and signaled toward a starship that had just passed. There was a flag flying above the starship, and there was a clear Zhao written on the flag. This was Great General Zhao's starship, and Zhao Luan had just disembarked. He was walking behind a tall and slim male, and his expression was incredibly respectful. Huh, wasn't this great general severely wounded? Why is he heading out so soon? It seems that this large tomb is far too tempting. Even the recuperating Great General Zhao couldn't resist its attraction. Ling Han nodded in acknowledgement. Zhao Luan would be even more brazen here, and if they came across each other alone, he didn't believe that Great General Zhao would give him any face. He had humiliated Zhao Luan several times, after all, and Zhao Luan was even the only child of Great General Zhao. It would be strange if the latter wasn't ticked off. The starship docked, and everyone disembarked with enthusiasm. However, the starship instantly turned around to return after everyone had disembarked. Heavens knew how many more people on the joint peace planet were still waiting to come over. Thus, it was only natural that the starship would try to make a few more round trips, making a huge profit in the process. Moreover, they didn't sell return tickets, but rather one-way tickets. If one wanted to return to the joint peace planet, then thank you, please continue to pay. Ling Han determined his bearings, yet direction was of little use in this place. Everything was relative. The spiritual qi here is extremely thin, so it's completely unsuitable for cultivation. However, this place is also swarming with life essence, so it can also be said that it's a holy land for cultivation. How strange, Ling Han said. Where should we go? Shui Yinyu asked. Let's head to a place with no one first, so we can let Big Brother and the others out. Ling Han looked around. Many people had come here, yet due to the huge size of this continent, it seemed like there was only an insignificant amount of people. The two of them continued forward. Ling Han was just about to let Feng Piyun and the others out, yet he suddenly frowned and looked behind. You people have followed us for quite some time, Ling Han said calmly. For men had appeared behind them at some point in time. They looked to be around 30 years old, and they were all at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. However, one's age couldn't be determined by their appearance after they advanced into the immortal level. Judging by vigorous vitality, however, they were indeed middle-aged men. They were probably around 20,000 years old. Brat, you can fuck off now. As for this beauty, we'll make sure to look after her. The four men roared with laughter. Ling Han shook his head. Trash truly did exist everywhere. They had only just entered the large tomb, yet they had already come across 4 perverted bastards. You're still not fucking off? Holy sh*t. I had to hold myself back for several days on the ship. Now that there's such a beauty before me, how can I contain myself? Third brother. You've never been able to fix this habit of yours. If you're truly desperate, you can take the back door of this brat. Otherwise, you're third in line. So won't your little buddy burst in lust when you see Big Brother and me enjoying ourselves? Fuck off. I'm not gay. The 4 men were wanton and unrestrained, their speech full of vulgarity and profanity. Ling Han and Shui Yinyu were only at the high extreme and medium extreme of the mountain river tier, respectively, so the 4 should have absolutely no trouble suppressing them. Big Brother, it seems like this brat wants to resist. Then kill him. This beauty is truly seductive. I can't contain myself any longer. The 4 men attacked together. They clearly had higher cultivation levels, yet they still insisted on ganging up on Ling Han. It was clear that they had already made a habit of this. Rules and whatnot were all troublesome. Disposing of their opponents as quickly as possible was the most important thing. Ling Han humphed and drew his divine demon sword. Sword rays swept out as he charged toward the 4 men. Yeah? The 4 men all yelped in astonishment. They hadn't expected for Ling Han to be so powerful, and realized that he was a troublesome opponent once he launched an attack. However, he was only a little troublesome. After all, he was merely at the high extreme. Humph! Your cultivation levels are so much higher, yet you still want to attain victory by ganging up on him. Do you people know no shame? A voice that was filled with haughtiness traveled over, quickly followed by the appearance of a youth striding over. He had long green hair, and there was divine light flashing across his body. There were 10 or so youths following behind him, all of them wearing respectful expressions. It was clear that this green-haired youth was their leader. Chapter 1094, Young Master Wuque. Chapter 1094, Young Master Wuque. Who are you? How dare you stick your nose in our matters? One of the men turned around to scold the green-haired youth. Insolence! How dare you speak to young Master Wuque like that? A young man who was holding a spear leaped out from the group of youths and shouted, I'll send you on your way. He raised his spear to attack. The man instantly drew his saber to parry. Ding, ding, ding. After a few exchanges, his expression changed drastically. Although both of them were at the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier, his battle prowess was a lot weaker than that of his opponent. Thus, he was immediately forced onto his back foot. Meanwhile, his opponent's spear was especially deadly and brimming with killing intent. This made him feel the threat of death. So powerful, he thought to himself in astonishment. He frantically roared and started to fight as if his life depended on it. Bursts of divine light exuded from his body as he suddenly grew several times his original size, becoming a giant who stood 9 meters tall. Pooh! His palm was run through by the spear, yet not even a single drop of blood flowed out. It was as if he had no blood in his body. Moreover, it appeared as if he couldn't feel pain either, and he swung his saber toward the spear-wielding youth with his other hand. The spear-wielding man couldn't help but be surprised. He hurriedly swiped his spear up, pushing his opponent back and dissolving the might of his attack. A look of realization appeared on his face, and he said, You didn't expand your body, but merely filled it up to make yourself look bigger. It's not a genuine extension of your body, and thus you were completely unaffected and didn't even bleed after being struck by my spear. So what if you know? The man chuckled coldly and said, My body is so large right now, so how are you going to hit my vital points? Do you know where my vital points are? Haha, I don't need to know where your vital points are. Against my chilly frost spear, your only option is death. Veins of divine patterns instantly lit up as the spear-wielding man activated his spear. Boundless amounts of frosty air surged into the surroundings, and it was as if the nearby land had been turned into an ice cave. The man's teeth couldn't help but clack. There was a stunned look in his eyes, and he yelped, Level 4 God Tool. It was clear that this spear-wielding man was subordinate to the green-haired youth, yet even an underling like him could possess a level 4 God Tool. What kind of concept was this? This group of youths. Unbelievable. Their backgrounds were definitely astonishing. Heh, it's all just a misunderstanding, another man chimed in and said, Since these two are your friends, please forgive us for our recklessness. The spear-wielding man looked toward the green-haired youth, who merely gave a cold smile before saying, You still want to live after daring to offend this beauty? The spear-wielding man instantly understood his intentions. He raised his spear and launched an attack toward the 4 men. He was extremely powerful right now, and under the might of the spear, the surroundings were transformed into a world of snow and ice. In fact, the might of his attack had already surpassed the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Coupled with his own battle prowess, it was as if there were 2 elites fighting alongside each other. Even though he was fighting against 4 people by himself, he still enjoyed a great advantage. By the looks of it, he would be able to dispose of those 4 men in a few more strikes. Ling Han couldn't help but nod. It was difficult for cultivators to attain a battle prowess of even 1 star. However, God tools were different. This was because elites could nurture such weapons and then bestow them to their descendants. As such, their descendants could easily surpass 4 or even 5 stars. This made Ling Han's anticipation grow even stronger. Just how mighty would his divine demon sword be when it caught up to his cultivation level? It was comparable to divine metal, and it wasn't simply a weapon that could grow. Ah, it wasn't long before the 4 men were all killed. The spear-wielding man lowered his weapon and respectfully returned to his position behind the green-haired youth. This was an astonishing sight. One had to realize that the spear-wielding man possessed an incredible battle prowess and could easily make a name for himself. However, he was acting like a lackey right now. The green-haired youth walked over and flashed a charismatic smile at Shui Yinyu, saying, "Milady, I'm sorry that you had to be frightened like that." Ling Han shook his head in his mind. By the looks of it, he had a new rival in love. This wife of his genuinely possessed an incredible charisma. People would try to strike a conversation with her wherever she went, and these people were all of high positions and statuses, no less. It had been Zhao Luan before, and it was this green-haired youth now. Moreover, his background was probably no weaker than that of Zhao Luan. Ling Han extended an arm to block the youth, saying, "Please say whatever you want to say. Just don't come too close." Insolence. The spear-wielding male leaped out and pointed his spear at Ling Han. "Chang's son, calm down." The green-haired youth smiled faintly and lightly pressed down on the spear of the male, saying, "I'm Wuque, and I come from the domineering summer majestic empire of the Great Growth Planet." The man who he had referred to as Chang's son immediately put his spear away and respectfully said, "Please excuse me for my actions, young master." Wuque simply waved his hands before turning to Ling Han and Shui Yinyu and saying, "And you two are?" Ling Han. "This is my wife, Shui Yinyu," Ling Han said with a smile. Wuque's expression involuntarily became dark. He had seen many beauties before, but this was the first that he had seen a seductive beauty as charming as Shui Yinyu. A feeling of admiration and a desire to possess her had arisen in his mind at first sight. Yet, she was already taken. He swept his gaze over Ling Han, a look of ridicule involuntarily appearing on his face. How could such a lowly person deserve such a jade-like beauty? He chuckled coldly. Anyone who wasn't blind would be able to determine who was better between him and Ling Han. He had full confidence in himself. He was the 67th son of the Emperor of the domineering Summer Majestic Empire. At the same time, he was also the youngest son. However, he was the Emperor's most outstanding child, having already reached the peak stage of the consummate level of the Mountain River tier at a young age of 507. More importantly, he had been placed in a small world when he had been around 40 years old. There, he had successfully opened the sky and cultivated each cultivation level to perfection. He was full of ambition, and it was his aim to become the strongest prodigy in all of history. He smiled and said, "Friends, the situation here is unknown, and it might be extremely dangerous. How about we team up and work with each other?" Shui Yinyu shook her head and said, "We merely met by chance. There's no need." She naturally knew what was going on in his mind. However, her heart was already with Ling Han now, so she was naturally unwilling to cause any more troubles. The two of them were about to leave, yet the spear-wielding male instantly dashed over to block their path. "Chang's son, what are you doing?" Wuque shouted coldly. The spear-wielding male hurriedly retreated and kneeled down on one knee, saying, "I was too rash." Wuque flashed a confident smile and said, "Ms. Shui, we'll meet again." Shui Yinyu didn't reply. Meanwhile, Ling Han simply waved his hand, not even turning around to look. "Young master." The spear-wielding male shuffled over, a puzzled look on his face. Young master clearly liked that woman, so why didn't he force her to stay? With his identity, status, and talent, what kind of woman won't throw herself at him? "You don't understand," Wuque said with a chuckle. There was a meaningful look on his face. Where was the fun in easily obtainable women? Was he short on beauties? However, a woman as charismatic as Shui Yinyu was like a fine wine that had to be savored slowly. Not only did he want her person, he more so wanted her heart. Thus, he couldn't act too rashly. "We'll meet by chance again." He waved his hand and said, "Follow them." Chapter 1095, Stone Statue Army. Chapter 1095, Stone Statue Army. Ling Han and Shui Yinyu walked for a while, and after making sure that there was no one nearby, Ling Han waved his hand and let the Rain Emperor and others out of the Black Tower. However, he didn't let everyone out. Kan Yi, Zhihui Jiao, and his other followers remained in the Black Tower to cultivate. Their cultivation level was still too low, so there would be no benefits even if they came out. Thus, it was naturally better for them to place their focus on cultivation. Only 5 people left the Black Tower: Feng Piyun, the Rain Emperor, Mu Rongqing, Helian Tianyun, and Ding Ping. The Azura Demon Emperor was in the body of a puppet wolf right now, so he couldn't be counted as a person. Anyhow, he was a being from the netherworld to begin with, so he had never been a human anyway. So, this is the large tomb among the stars? The Rain Emperor and the others were all astounded. This place was completely different from their imagination and seemed almost no different from the Joint Peace Planet. It was just that the spiritual chi here was thinner, though the life essence here was astonishingly abundant. Ling Han nodded and said, "This is the interior of the large tomb. Its size is indeed incredible. Hee, since we've arrived here, how about we each go our own way?" There was a glimmer in the Rain Emperor's eyes, and there was a strong fighting spirit exuding from his body. Feng Piyun and Mu Rongqing both nodded in agreement. "I say we travel together. That way, it's easier for us to look out for each other." Ling Han felt that this place was dangerous, and there were also far too many elites present. The Rain Emperor and the others had broken through to the immortal level, and they also possessed the ability to fight above their cultivation level. However, there was still a great number of people who could easily defeat or suppress them. "Fourth brother, we're all more inclined toward nurturing ourselves through battle," Feng Piyun said with a smile. "Cultivating in seclusion isn't the right path for us." Ling Han faltered for a moment and then slowly nodded. His 3 brothers were all supreme prodigies, especially the Rain Emperor, who had once been a ruler. How could such people stay under the wings of others? They were all proud people, so they naturally had to walk their own path. "Fine. When the time comes, we'll meet up at the exit." Ling Han wasn't a hesitant person either. "Fourth brother, take care," Feng Piyun and the others said. They all headed off in their own directions. "Huh? They've all run away that quickly?" Helian Tianyun scratched his head and said, "Since they've all gone, I won't stay here to ride your coattail either. Little Ling, till later." He also left in a different direction. "Master," Ding Ping was also itching to head off on his own. Ling Han couldn't help but roll his eyes. "You break through to the immortal level first. When you succeed, I'll also allow you to train outside by yourself. Now, however, you can remain honest and stay by my side." "Understood." Ding Ping instantly conceded. The 3 of them also chose a direction. This was an expanse of plains, and there wasn't a single notable landmark in the surroundings to help one discern their bearings. Thus, their aim was merely not to retrace their own path. This place was desolate, and there was no life on the plains. There were no rodents or rabbits, and there wasn't even grass or other plants. It appeared as if this was a barren land. This was especially strange. There was no spiritual chi here, but ordinary beings didn't need spiritual chi, no? In any case, the life essence here was shockingly abundant. So shouldn't this place have been thick with greenery and filled with animals? Why was it a desolate expanse of barren land? They continued forward for almost a day. "Huh." Ling Han was the first to cry out in surprise. There was a sea of people before them, and it looked as if they were an army standing in formation. Just one row of the formation already had a few thousand people. If he cast his eyes over a few more rows, the amount of people would number in tens of thousands. "Master, what's wrong?" Ding Ping asked hurriedly. Ling Han activated his Eye of Truth, and the look of astonishment on his face became even more intense. This was because the sea of people before them actually wasn't consisting of people, but stone statues. "Let's move faster," he shouted. "Okay." Ding Ping hurriedly nodded. However, he was only at the Shattering Void tier, so how could his speed compare to Ling Han's and Shui Yinyu's? He was instantly kicked in the rear by an impatient Ling Han. "Xiao!" He flew toward the stone statues. "Master!" he wailed in anguish. Shui Yinyu rolled her eyes at Ling Han. If others had such a talented disciple, they would definitely treat him like a treasure. However, Ling Han was completely different, and he was always thinking of ways to torment his disciple. Anyhow, the speed of Ding Ping's cultivation was clear for all to see, and if Shui Yinyu didn't work harder, it was extremely likely that she would be surpassed by him. Ling Han laughed loudly, and he grabbed onto Shui Yinyu as he said, "Disciple, your master is merely testing your reaction speed. However, your performance has disappointed me greatly." Pong! Ding Ping fell headfirst into the ground, directly getting stuck in it. He pulled his head out, only to find that he had already landed before the large army. This gave him a fright, and he hurriedly put on a cautious expression. Only after a short while did he realize that these were actually just stone statues. Meanwhile, Ling Han and Shui Yinyu had already arrived. The Azura Demon Emperor followed closely behind them. Ling Han swept his gaze over the army and said in surprise, "There are at least 1,000,000 stone statues in this stone statue formation. Are these grave goods one?" Shui Yinyu asked curiously. Although this formation of 1,000,000 stone statues was astonishing, the great elite who was buried here was at least at the Eternal River tier. That being the case, this formation of 1,000,000 stone statues appeared ordinary in comparison. Probably, there are 1,000,000 people to accompany him, so he won't be lonely in the afterlife. Ling Han shook his head and continued, "Alas, even invincible elites can't escape death. Is there truly no one who can remain undying for all eternity?" Although the lifespan of Genesis tier cultivators was incredibly long, there was still a limit. After all, they could only live for a maximum of 4 billion years. This was a terrifyingly large number, yet it was nothing compared to eternity. There would eventually come a day where everything was laid to rest. Huh? There's a stone tablet here. They walked left for a while, only to find a stone tablet that measured 9 meters tall standing before the stone statue formation. There were words engraved on the stone tablet. These were not blurry, unlike the ones at the main entrance. Instead, they were crisp and clear. Those who believe they are invincible can challenge this formation. Ling Han read. "Should we walk around or challenge the formation?" Shui Yinyu asked. Heavens knew what this stone statue formation was. It was best not to put themselves in danger. Ling Han was just about to speak, yet he suddenly faltered, saying, "There's movement ahead." They all leaped up, only to see a group of people entering the stone statue formation from 300 meters to their left. Meanwhile, the stone statues that had been rigid and unmoving surprisingly started to move, launching attacks toward that group of people. Right now, those people were engaged in an intense battle. "Puppets!" Ling Han and Shui Yinyu cried in unison. They were quite familiar with these kinds of beings now. However, there had only been thousands of puppets on Earth's core island, most of which were only at the low extreme of the mountain river tier. Meanwhile, the puppets here were all at the early stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. They possessed a frightening battle prowess. The strength of the challengers wasn't great, and they were kicked out of the formation after a short while. They were all bruised and bloodied, with wounds covering their entire bodies. "Let's walk around," a person said. This suggestion was quickly accepted by the others, and they all started to walk around the stone statues. The stone statue formation was only around 1 kilometer wide, yet it was incredibly deep. Thus, it was entirely possible that the number of stone statues numbered over millions. The group of people involuntarily stole a few extra glances at Shui Yinyu when they passed by. It seemed like some of them wanted to cause trouble, yet after glancing back, these people frantically increased their speed and left. Ling Han looked back, only to see Wuque and his followers casually walking over. The group of people from before were most likely scared off by Wuque. Wuque smiled faintly and said, "Hee hee, we meet again. The fate between us is indeed strong." However, he was also a little puzzled. There had only been Ling Han and Shui Yinyu before, so why was there suddenly a cultivator at the Shattering Void tier and a puppet wolf with them? Chapter 1096, Challenging the Formation. Chapter 1096, Challenging the Formation. Shui Yinyu was displeased in her mind. She detested such clingy people. However, Ling Han was present, so she naturally wouldn't say too much. She would let Ling Han deal with the matter. Ling Han chuckled and said, "In order to avoid any further coincidences, please, you first." He gestured for Wuque to enter the stone statue formation first. He had already seen the might of the formation, and each of the stone statues possessed a battle prowess at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Although they were only at the early stage, their overwhelming numbers more than made up for it. It could be said that apart from Sun-Moon tier elites, pretty much no one at the mountain river tier could successfully navigate out of the stone statue formation. There weren't just a few hundred or a few thousand stone statues, but at least millions, who could stand up against such a tremendous number of these stone statues. The spear-wielding man immediately took a step forward to whisper a word of warning, saying, "Be careful, young master." They had arrived later than Ling Han, so they had only seen the group of disheveled people walking around the army of statues. Combining this with the scene before them, they could easily guess that the stone statues before them weren't ordinary. A confident look appeared on Wuque's face. He was a prince of the domineering Summer Majestic Empire, and was a peerless prodigy who would rule over an era. He was the embodiment of invincibility in the same cultivation level, and as long as these stone statues hadn't reached the Sun-Moon tier, there was nothing for him to be afraid of. Moreover, after glancing at the wounds suffered by the group of people before, he could determine that the battle prowess of these stone statues was far from reaching the Sun-Moon tier. Believing in his own invincibility, he didn't simply believe Tishi was an invincible being. He looked at Shui Yinyu and said, "Miss Shui, how about I escort you through this formation?" It couldn't be more obvious that he was trying to steal her from Ling Han. "Heh, there's no need to trouble an outsider like you." Ling Han waved a hand and said, "In any case, you mightn't even be able to make it through yourself. I suggest you don't brag too much." A look of annoyance flashed across Wuque's face. He had naturally paid no attention to Ling Han. However, this ant had provoked him time and time again. He was truly seeking death. Even so, he still had to maintain his princely demeanor before Shui Yinyu. "Then I'll navigate through it for Ms. Shui to see," he said calmly. He purposefully didn't mention Ling Han in order to show his disdain. He looked at the stone tablet and read, "Those who believe they are invincible can challenge this formation. Hee, as long as my opponent's cultivation levels are the same as mine, I am indeed invincible." He strode into the stone statue formation. After a few steps, the nearby stone statues all came to life, launching attacks towards Wuque. "Weaklings like you aren't worthy of being my opponent." Wuque didn't attack. Instead, a terrifying aura surged from his body as he glared at the statues. Pong, pong, pong. The stone statues that had leaped over were instantly sent flying. Powerful. He was indeed very powerful. Ling Han nodded in his mind. He could also defeat opponents at the early stage of the consummate level, but he definitely couldn't send his opponents flying simply by relying on a burst of aura from his body. By the looks of it, Wuque wasn't only at the peak stage of the consummate level. He potentially possessed a power of 4 or even 5 stars. This was the reason behind him being so powerful. "Young master is so great," the spear-wielding man and the others praised, their arms raised in excitement. They all followed behind, challenging the formation alongside Wuque. However, even though they were all at the consummate level, the difference in their battle prowess was significant. For example, the spear-wielding man was extremely powerful and was able to send a stone statue flying with each swipe of his spear. However, there were also those who were weaker, and they were instantly plunged into a perilous situation after being surrounded by a dozen or so stone statues. Wuque didn't show any sign of wanting to head back to help. He simply clasped his hands behind his back as he continued forward, the air of his arrogance already soaring through the heavens. "If I'm to be honest, this person is indeed very powerful," Ling Han said. He wasn't afraid of mistaking their battle prowess. After all, he could use the spear-wielding man as a comparison. This youth was very powerful, and he was able to send a stone statue flying with each of his strikes. However, after venturing deeper into the formation, he also showed signs of exertion. Meanwhile, Wuque still hadn't launched an attack yet. It was just that the speed of his advance had become slightly slower. After all, releasing his aura to defeat enemies required more origin power than simply launching an attack. This was the price of showing off. His origin power was abundant, yet it couldn't stand being used so wastefully. Beads of sweat were already forming on his forehead. However, he hadn't even passed 1% of the stone statue formation yet. After walking forward for a short while, Wuque couldn't rely solely on his aura anymore. He swept his hands outward, sending terrifying waves of power toward the stone statues, easily blasting them into the air. It appeared as if he were invincible. Dingping shuffled over and asked quietly, "Master, can you defeat him?" Ling Han pondered for a moment before saying, "If there's a limit on the number of exchanges, then he wins. If there's no limit, then I win." If there were a limited number of exchanges and victory couldn't be decided, then victory would go to the person who had enjoyed the advantage. In such a case, the victor would definitely be Wuque. His battle prowess surpassed his cultivation level by more than 4 stars, and he was more so 6 sub-minor levels above Ling Han. An advantage of 10 stars was no small deal. However, Ling Han also possessed a powerful physique and an incredible recovery ability, was the type of person who wouldn't die unless he were insta-killed. Thus, if they engaged in a drawn-out battle, Wuque's stamina would eventually run out. As such, Ling Han would naturally emerge victorious. Of course, after learning of Ling Han's freakish physique, there was probably no one who would engage in a drawn-out battle with him. In such a case, it was more likely than not that the battle would end in a draw. Fortunately, his words weren't heard by the spear-wielding man. Otherwise, he would definitely mock them for being shameless and inflated. More people arrived behind them. Some took a detour around the statues, while others started to challenge the formation. Ling Han had been indifferent at the start, yet a look of surprise quickly appeared on his face. This was because those who arrived were all at the Mountain River tier. So be it if there were no Heavenly Body tier elites, they were extremely few in number, after all. However, it was quite strange that not a single Sun Moon tier elite had arrived here. Could it be that the crowds were unknowingly dispersed? No wonder there are only puppets at the Mountain River tier in this formation. This is because this formation is for those at the Mountain River tier to challenge. Otherwise, if a Sun Moon tier elite came, this formation wouldn't be able to block them even if there were tens of millions of puppets. After all, how can such puppets block the steps of a Sun Moon tier elite? This was an astounding ability. Everything had happened without their knowledge. Even though Ling Han noticed it now, he had only reached this conclusion after observing the events before him. In reality, he still couldn't sense anything out of the ordinary. An elite is an elite, after all. The things they've laid out are still so impressive, even countless years after their death. Many people challenged the stone statue formation, convinced that they were invincible. However, the large majority of them were knocked out after advancing only an extremely short distance. Fortunately, one didn't need to retreat from the path that they had advanced when they couldn't hang on against the stone statues any longer. The stone statue formation was only 1 kilometer wide, after all, and those who gave up could easily exit from the sides. However, the strange thing was that people could only exit from the 2 sides, not enter. Was this to prevent people from cheating? Ling Han was especially intrigued. He decided to challenge the formation. "You two take a detour around," he said to Shui Yinyu and Dingping. Then, he nodded to the Azura Demon Emperor. He was signaling for him to protect his wife and disciple. The Azura Demon Emperor hurriedly wagged his tail in understanding. "Be careful." Shui Yinyu clearly knew that Ling Han possessed the Black Tower, yet she still couldn't help but worry about him. "Remember not to be rash." "I know," Ling Han said with a smile. In reality, he wasn't scared at all. Following his breakthrough to the high extreme, the strength of his physique had already reached the level of level 4 godly metal. Thus, what did it matter even if he were attacked by hundreds upon thousands of puppets? They wouldn't be able to injure him at all. In any case, he was the nemesis of puppets. Ling Han confidently strode into the stone statue formation. Chapter 1097, Four Tears. Chapter 1097, Four Tears. Xiao. The stone statue next to Ling Han instantly awakened from its slumber and threw its fist toward him. Ling Han also clenched his fists and responded with a punch. Pong! The stone statue instantly stumbled backward. Its power was nothing extraordinary, and it was at the early stage of the consummate level. However, Ling Han's power could surpass 5 stars now, so the might of his fist had already reached the late stage of the consummate level. Thus, he was naturally able to enjoy a crushing advantage. However, numerous other stone statues awakened and started to attack Ling Han. Some leaped high into the air, while others barged toward Ling Han. Their attacks were all ruthless, and none of them held back. This was also the reason why Ling Han didn't let Shui Yinyu and Ding Ping challenge the formation. It was possible that they would be killed in one strike. Even if one was on the back foot and wanted to exit the formation, they would need to possess an incredibly strong battle prowess in order to do so. It wasn't as simple or as easy as retreating whenever one wanted to. There were blood, limbs, and even corpses in the stone statue formation. Ling Han saw a large number of super geniuses in the formation. In fact, some of them were no weaker than Wuque, and they were able to defeat the stone statues using only a single hand. They appeared especially calm. Ling Han believed that the number of prodigies that had entered this large tomb far exceeded the number that he had seen so far. This was because not all prodigies traveled alone. Some brought a bunch of weaklings with them, and some traveled with their seniors. There were also some that traveled alone, though there were Sun Moon Tier Guardians protecting them in secret. However, the Sun Moon Tier and Heavenly Body Tier elites naturally wouldn't appear in this place. Perhaps there were stone statue formations corresponding to the Sun Moon Tier and Heavenly Body Tier as well. However, prodigies at the Mountain River Tier would have no opportunity to challenge them. They would merely be able to look on from the sidelines. Meanwhile, the prodigies were also fighting among themselves. When this expedition ended, it would naturally be time for the Majestic Heaven Sect to recruit disciples. Perhaps many of the people here would become new disciples of the Majestic Heaven Sect. In other words, they'd become competitors. Thus, the competition and conflict between them had already begun. Of course, Ling Han didn't attract the attention of anyone. Although he was advancing, he wasn't doing so leisurely. After all, his cultivation level was still too low. The competition between the prodigies attracted the attention of numerous people, all gathered by either side of the stone statue formation to spectate. They wanted to know how many people could successfully challenge the formation. If there were those who succeeded, they wanted to know who had come first. Now that they were being compared against each other, the prodigies naturally felt an even stronger fighting spirit. Of course, it wasn't only the young prodigies who were competitive. The Mountain River Tier cultivators of the older generation also joined in on this competition, unwilling to be outdone. There were a few of them who were indeed extremely powerful. Although they hadn't been able to reach the Sun Moon Tier yet, they had cultivated their cultivation level to an incredibly solid state, raising their battle prowess through all kinds of different methods. There were obviously no rules against using god tools in this formation, and Ling Han saw an elder activating a turtle shell that had dozens of divine patterns on its surface. It was radiating with light right now, and it helped him block countless attacks. Everyone was displaying their unique battle prowess. Some relied on their strength, while others relied on their god tools. Those who had nothing to rely on could only exit through the sides lest they were beaten to death. Wuque was still heading the pack, though the people behind were already closing in on him. However, no one overtook him. The pressure on the leader was the greatest. Thus, since they were still so far from the finish line, the prodigies all decided to follow behind someone else. They weren't in a hurry to overtake him. Wuque is leading the pack right now. Who's Wuque? He's a prince of the domineering Summer Majestic Empire, and he's also the #1 prodigy of the Great Growth Planet. It's rumored that the domineering Sun Emperor specially sent him to a small world so he could open the sky and receive the blessing of heaven and earth. He'll certainly become a Heavenly Body Tier elite in the future, And it's even possible that he's a legendary 5-star genius. 5-star genius. TSK, TSK, TSK. No wonder he's leading everyone else. He'll definitely win. Who can compete against him? Moreover, the domineering Sun Emperor actually left a small world for him to open. What astonishing power! However, the other prodigies can't be underestimated, either. Look at the person coming second now. She's Xiao Cixi from the southern plentiful planet, and she's the princess of the Thousand Frost Majestic Empire. She's also a supreme prodigy who once went to a small world and opened the sky. Fuck. Having a good father makes life so much easier. The person in third is Su Jing, an excellent disciple of the large stream sect. His strength is also profound. The person in fourth is Duan, and he's also a powerful prodigy. These 4 people were the most eye-catching out of the young prodigies, displaying strength far above their peers. This was because they had opened the sky, allowing them to start at a higher level than everyone else. Even if they couldn't form 5 mountains and rivers, their power alone would still be able to surpass 6 stars. This was astonishing, and even Ling Han couldn't face these 4 people head-on. The 4 of them formed the first tier, with no one else being able to keep up with them. In fact, the distance between them and everyone else continued to increase. The second tier consisted of slightly inferior prodigies, with most of them being mountain river tier cultivators from the older generation. For example, the person who was using the turtle shell god tool to protect himself and push on forward was among them. This god tool attracted the envy of many. It was something that could remain intact after blocking so many attacks at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Who wouldn't want to own it? The third tier consisted of prodigies who were, again, more inferior. Their battle prowess was around 3 stars, yet all of them were already at the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. If they weren't at this cultivation level, they would have been defeated by the formation already. Then there was the 4th tier, where the prodigies possessed a battle prowess of 2 stars. They were also at the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. The people behind them couldn't be regarded as a 5th tier, as they had only just entered the formation. Those who were too weak had already been swept out of the formation. Ling Han was in the 4th tier right now, and he wasn't in a hurry to advance. He walked slowly and steadily, using the puppets to polish his battle prowess. Like the Rain Emperor, Feng Piyun, and the others, he was also someone who improved through battling. However, his cultivation level had advanced too quickly in recent times. Although his mental state was able to keep up, he was still lacking in real-life battle experience. Thus, this seemingly endless stone statue formation was a great opportunity for him to train. If one looked closely, they would realize that Ling Han wasn't simply advancing through the formation. Rather, each stone statue that he defeated was on the verge of crumbling. If it weren't for the unique power of the formation allowing these stone statues to recover rapidly, the stone statues that were blasted back by Ling Han would all have been completely destroyed. After advancing some unknown distance, Ling Han suddenly realized that there was an indescribable power contained within the punches of the stone statues. When their fists struck his body, he actually felt a slight pain. One had to realize that Ling Han's physique was on par with level 4 godly metal. How could power at the early stage of the consummate level cause him pain? Inconceivable. Ling Han carefully observed their attacks, and he realized that a divine pattern had appeared on the fists of the stone statues at some unknown point in time. By the looks of it, it was this divine pattern that caused their attacks to become more vicious. The stone statues' power clearly hadn't increased, yet the threat that they posed became much higher than before. Pong, 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 pong. Intense battles raged throughout the formation. Agonized wails sounded from the latter 3 tiers as some of the prodigies were beaten beyond recognition. Many were unable to continue, and they hurriedly charged toward the sides. However, there were those who succeeded, and there were also those who were knocked down by a flurry of fists, never to get up again. These people became unidentifiable corpses on the ground. Only now did everyone realize that the might of the stone statue formation had increased. Chapter 1098, Fast and Slow. Chapter 1098, Fast and Slow. This? The spectators on the two sides were all pale with shock. They've only walked 1/10 of the distance, yet the might of the puppets has already increased. How can they possibly make it to the end? Yeah, it might become even stronger after a while. Isn't this almost impossible? Everyone shook their heads, thinking this formation was impossible to pass. The 4 tiers of prodigies continued to advance. The 4th tier originally had the most people, but it rapidly decreased in size as they entered what was speculated to be the second segment of the formation. After a while, they became one of the tiers with the least people, with only a few more members than the 4 people in the first tier. Huh. Everyone was astonished. As the large majority of the 4th tier was eliminated, the few remaining people all became especially eye-catching. Thus, Ling Han immediately attracted a lot of attention. I can't believe it. There's actually someone at the high extreme of the mountain river tier. By the looks of it, he still hasn't formed his 3rd river yet. It's clear that he still hasn't reached the late stage of the high extreme. Yet he's still able to make it so far? This doesn't make any sense at all. Is he a freak? He's probably got some treasure that can protect him from injuries. Everyone nodded in agreement. If this weren't the case, there would be no way that Ling Han could have advanced so far, even if he were a supreme prodigy. His cultivation level was too low, after all, and the attacks from the stone statues were relentless and ruthless. It was as if they would never stop attacking. How could a cultivator at the high extreme of the mountain river tier possess this much origin power to use? However, little did they know that Ling Han also practiced body arts. His stamina would recover over time, and this was completely different from origin power. More and more people were eliminated as they continued forward, and the original horde of several thousand people had already decreased dramatically, with only several hundred people remaining. Those who were eliminated were mostly from the 4th tier. Some had fled from the formation, while many had also been killed by the stone statues. Right now, the 2nd and 3rd tiers had the most members. There were 100 or so people in the 1st tier, and there were 300 or so people in the 2nd tier. Meanwhile, both the 1st and 4th tiers numbered in the single digits. Fight, fight, fight. The hot-bloodedness of the young prodigies was all stimulated, with their pride causing them to become even more resolute. Since this trial exists, it's definitely possible to pass. Since that's the case, why can't I be the person who passes? Such determination was to be lauded at times, as it could push cultivators to improve. However, it was also detrimental at times, as refusing to back down could cause one to lose their life. After 2 hours or so, the 1st tier of prodigies finally neared 2/10 of the formation. As the battle prowess of the stone statues had increased after the first 10th of their journey, everyone prepared themselves for when the stone statues would suddenly become stronger. Sure enough, the battle prowess of the stone statues increased again when they passed the 20% mark. A second divine pattern materialized on their fists. The elder who was using the turtle shell was the first to fall victim. The turtle shell was relentlessly attacked by the stone statues, and the divine patterns that decorated it released an unstable glow. This glow eventually died, and the turtle shell was shattered into 7 pieces. With his defensive treasure shattered, how could the elder stand up against the relentless attacks of the stone statues? He was instantly smashed into pulp, not even having the chance to escape. I'm out. In the face of such a brutal reality, many prodigies chose to swallow their pride. This was only the 3rd stage, and there were still 7 other stages ahead. It would definitely become more and more difficult, and as such, it would be impossible for them to pass. Is this really something that a mountain river tier cultivator can accomplish? However, everyone's eyes instantly turned to Ling Han. He was the only remaining member of the 4th tier. Everyone else had either fled the formation or been killed, yet he, a cultivator at the high extreme of the mountain river tier, still persisted. Who is this person? I know, right? He's not the only person with a treasure, yet he's the only high extreme cultivator remaining. Freak. He's the #1 prodigy in our chaotic star's Majestic Empire, which is located on the joint peace planet. He arrived from a small world 2 years ago after opening the sky. Someone from the Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire was present, and they revealed Luanxing's identity. What? Everyone was stunned, unable to believe their ears. Was this person joking? Before this, they had felt that Ling Han's cultivation level was too low, as he was only at the high extreme of the mountain river tier. Even so, he was still able to advance through the stone statue formation. This made them realize that he was an absolute freak. However, after hearing that Ling Han had only arrived from the small world after opening the sky 2 years ago, their first reaction was that Ling Han's cultivation speed was far too quick. He had only been in the immortal realm for 2 years, yet he had already advanced from the shattering void tier to the high extreme of the mountain river tier. Was this possible? However, there was more than one person from the Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire here, and they all confirmed that this was true. The others had to believe this even if they didn't want to. After all, there was no point in lying about this. Even if they could fool people for a while, the truth would eventually come out. However, if this were true, then Ling Han was absolutely inhuman. His cultivation speed was shockingly quick. The 400 remaining prodigies quickly decreased to less than 200. This time, it was the third tier that lost the most members, falling from over 300 to just around 30. Some members from the second tier also gave up or died, yet they still maintained a count of over 100. Let's play a guessing game. When do you guys think that cultivator at the high extreme of the mountain river tier will stop? This person's voice was filled with curiosity. This attracted enthusiastic guesses from many people. However, it was a shame that there was no one to bet. After all, no one here had a good enough reputation for others to trust their money with. They came from over 100 different stars, and thus they were all unfamiliar with each other. Master will definitely make it through the formation, Ding Ping said with clenched fists. Of course, the Azura Demon Emperor concurred. Master is wise, mighty, and peerless throughout the world. He can easily complete this formation, even if it's 10 times longer. Shui Yinyu also trusted Ling Han's abilities. However, she couldn't help but grimace upon hearing the Azura Demon Emperor's words. He had already become shameless in order to praise and flatter Ling Han. At this time, even the first tier of cultivators had started to slow down. So what if they were Xia Wuque or Xiao Sisi? They all appeared strained under the relentless attacks from the countless stone statues. However, there was someone who had become quicker. Ling Han. He had already caught up to the third tier, and because of this, the fourth tier no longer existed. This was as he was the last person. Everyone clutched their heads upon seeing this. This was far too astonishing. The others were all slowing down, yet he actually had the ability to speed up. He's not speeding up. Rather, it's the others who have slowed down. However, he hasn't slowed down. Someone revealed the truth. Everyone was stunned. They were under increasing pressure with each step that they took, yet Ling Han was still able to maintain a steady pace. What did this signify? Crazy. The world's gone crazy. How the hell are you only at the high extreme of the mountain river tier? Indeed, Ling Han didn't feel too much pressure. Up until now, the puppets were unable to hurt him and could only cause him pain. As they couldn't injure him, Ling Han naturally didn't need to use the recovery ability of the indestructible Heaven Scroll. He still had heaps of trump cards. 2 hours passed, and the first tier of prodigies entered the fourth stage. The battle prowess of the stone statues rose again, with the number of divine patterns on their hands increasing to 3. Their power clearly hadn't increased, yet the appearance of these divine patterns raised their battle prowess by a large amount. It was absolutely shocking. The second tier of cultivators started to decrease in numbers. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.